Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What if Tsukiko Deku becomes Vigilante? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku POV, age 4, Mummy, do you think I'll get a cool quirk? The coolest. Even cooler than All Might's. Yes, honey. She kissed the top of my head and gave me a quick squeeze to calm me down while we waited for the doctor to come back with the results. I sat there rocking back and forth, waiting impatiently for the doctor to tell me what my quirk was. It felt like a lifetime had passed before the door opened behind us. I spun around on my chair, bouncing in anticipation, overlooking the glum look on the doctor's face. What's my quirk? Is it really cool? I asked, my eyes shining. The doctor sighed. I'm sorry, dear, but you don't have a quirk. With that one simple sentence, the world caved in around me. I turned around in my chair and pulled my knees up to my chest, holding them close. I could hear my mother talking to the doctor, asking if there was anything we could do to get a quirk, but their conversation seemed distant. Nothing registered in my mind other than that I was quirkless. Third-person POV in the days that followed, Izuku showed little emotion to the world, hiding in his room and only showing any sign of life when Inko called him for dinner. When he was made to leave the house and go to school, he protested, saying that all the kids would bully him, but his mother didn't listen and told him to stop being so dramatic. Izuku didn't understand what had happened to his mother. She had become colder towards him, showing him less love every time she saw him. As the days became weeks, Izuku lost hope of his mother loving him again, and he stopped protesting about going to school, letting everything happen as it came. Third person, Deku age 11. What do you want, Kaken? I'm bored. Let's fight. An evil grin spread across his face as he lifted his hands, small explosions erupting from his palms. Izuku got up from under the tree and ran as fast as he could away from Katsuki. Get him, you extras, roared Katsuki to the boys standing behind him. Izuku POV, I gotta go. Where do I go? I ran through the park, weaving between other children and parents. Demon nerd. Get back here. I turned and saw Kaken gaining on me, a group of boys with him. I left the park and ran down the street, turning down alleyways, hoping to reach home before they caught up. Left. Straight. Wait, no, it was a left. I hit a dead end. No. Found you, Deku. Don't try to run this time. We have you surrounded. Third-person POV Izuku spun around, and sure enough, there was a line of boys cutting off all exits with Bakugo in front of them, red eyes gleaming in the setting sun. Kaken, just leave me alone. Please. Is the little baby gonna cry? A mocking voice sounded, followed by jeering laughter. He will be after I'm through with him. Please, Kaken. I just want to go home. Oh, quit your whining. Katsuki POV my hands twitched. No one wants you here, nobody cares for you. Not even your own mother. As I said it, I saw a change in Deku's face. His eyes went from the dark green of leaves to a black abyss. Like I don't already know that. What have I done to you, Kaken? From what I can see, all I've done is try to befriend you. But I see now what a mistake that was. You deserve no one. You call your mother a hag. Your friends only hang out with you because they are afraid you will hurt them if they don't. Who's the real monster here, Kaken? He looked up at me, no humor in his face, a monotone voice, and dead eyes. I'd finally broken him. All the years I was just mucking about being a brat had taken its toll on him, breaking him down little by little until he was dead to the world. The heck are you saying, Midoriya? You've lost your mind. Let's finish him, Bakugo. A chorus of voices broke out. I'm gonna finish what I started, Deku, and this time you won't be getting up for a week. Time passed to midnight. Izuku POV I was floating in a white room. I'm not sure whether I was looking up or down. I just hung there in silence, not a breeze in there. Just me and the white room. I jolted awake. I was outside. Had I not gone home yet? I felt that I was lying in a warm puddle. Had it rained? My eyes fluttered open and I looked up. The moon was right above me. It's midnight. I was supposed to be home hours ago. I looked down. I was lying in a pool of blood. My head spun as I stood up hurriedly. I reached up to the side of my head and felt a large gash there, blood oozing out of it. I stumbled and fell to my knees, the world spinning around. Time skip 1 o'clock. I had finally gained enough stability to stand and walk to the street, using the wall as a guide and keeping to the shadows. The lamps along the road were casting a dim light around the area. Just enough to see where I'm going. It took me about half an hour to make it home, almost double the time it usually took. None of the lights were on. Izuku unlocked the door and pushed it open carefully before heading to his room. There, he changed out of his uniform, stuffing it into a bag, and put on a black hoodie and joggers. He bandaged the side of his head and chest, both of which had sustained painful injuries. He grabbed his spare rucksack, filling it with clothes and some food from the fridge. He then went into his mother's room and took her purse, removing all the cash inside. But like Kaken said, no one wants me for who I am, he whispered softly before taking his rucksack and the bag with his uniform and leaving the house. 3 days later, Katsuki sat in his living room, the news blaring in the background. Young male Izuku Midoriya, age 11, has gone missing. He was last sighted 3 days ago entering Enter Road name at 5:02 p.m., shortly followed by a group of boys assumed to be his age. Inko Midoriya reported him missing the next morning, saying he hadn't returned home the night before. A large stain was found in a neighboring alleyway, leading to suspicions of kidnapping or worse. If you have any information, please contact the authorities. Katsuki's mother turned off the news, horror and panic etched across her face. Oh my! I must go to Inko's house to make sure she is okay. Stay here, Katsuki. Your father will be home soon. After giving him a quick squeeze on the shoulder, she pulled on her shoes and grabbed her phone before leaving the house, the door locking behind her. Katsuki remained frozen, his mind racing. What have I done? Did I? No, I couldn't have. They didn't find a body, but there was so much blood. His pulse stopped. He clenched his fists and banged his head against them. Slightly dizzy, he wiped his cheeks dry as he heard his father unlocking the door. His father sat down next to him, hugging him and resting his head on his shoulder as Katsuki wept. Meanwhile, Izuku held his chest as blood seeped through his t-shirt. He hurried to the bathroom and took out his medkit, reapplying the bandages. He had found an empty apartment the day before, the first 2 days after running away. He had passed out in the woods and when he woke up, it was dark again. He had walked through the streets for hours, scavenging for food, only managing to find a bit of stale bread. As the sun rose, he stumbled across a newspaper with his face on the front. Well, at least one person cares enough to say I'm missing, he thought. Later that day, he narrowly missed being seen by ProHeroes Eraserhead and Present Mike as they patrolled the area. Breathing deeply, he found himself outside an abandoned apartment block. He opened the door and entered the atrium. After changing the dressings on his wounds, he began rewiring the electrics in the generator, which proved more difficult than he anticipated. Stumbling around in the dark, he found his flashlight and turned it on, noticing the streetlights that had once illuminated the area were now out. He could hear a group of people outside talking in low voices, 2 males and a female. He switched off his flashlight to avoid being noticed, knowing that a bright light in an abandoned building might attract heroes. A loud bang downstairs broke his thoughts. The group had entered the building, and a heavy downpour of rain began leaking through the broken windows. "Ah, my skirt is all wet now," said the female in a whiny voice. Oh, quit whining, Toga. You sound like a 5-year-old. Right, you too, shut it. You'll attract attention with the racket you're making. Izuku stood still, hardly daring to breathe. Toga. Those are villains, he thought, feeling a surge of fear. DMN Uhawks. Why are you even here? Don't you have patrol tonight? Yeah, I do, but not for another hour. What's it to you? Up for a game of cat and mouse. Izuku cautiously moved toward the door, trying to avoid the creaky floorboards in the dark. I keep sneezing. Why is someone thinking about this late at night? It isn't one of you two, is it? He heard one of them say, and Izuku froze, realizing the danger he was in. Dang, stop thinking about him. A volley of sneezes came from downstairs as the rain poured heavily outside. I think, sniffle, someone is here. Why else would someone be thinking about me at 1 a.m.? The group of three looked around, noticing a stairwell leading to the loft/attic area. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a small green eye watching them. It blinked, and then the door slammed shut and bolted itself. What the? Was that a kid? Dabi mumbled to himself. Oh, can I have them? Please see. Toga exclaimed. No, Toga. We need to have a chat with them. See what they know. You're no fun, Hawks, Toga pouted. Dabi walked up the stairwell, examining the door, trying to figure out how to open it. He knocked firmly. Hey, whoever is in there, open up now. We ain't gonna hurt you. Come on, open up. He bashed his fist against the door, causing the hinges to falter, leaving the bottom of the door jutting out slightly. Pushing the door, Dabi stepped into the attic room. At first glance, he didn't see anything, but after a second look, he spotted a small bundle trembling in the corner. Hawks and Toga followed him into the room, their attention drawn to the bundle. You don't hurt me. I didn't mean to be pry. The bundle spoke. Dabi approached and crouched down in front of it. A pair of emerald green eyes looked back at him. Don't worry, we won't hurt you. He glanced back at Hawks, hoping for support, but saw he was deep in thought. But aren't you villains? The bundle asked, raising its head slightly to reveal a freckled nose that was bright pink at the end, indicating a slight fever. Not all villains are bad, though, kid. Some are forced into it or don't realize the consequences until later, Dabi replied in a calming voice. The others joined him on the floor. Izuku's POV, the man in front of me, Dabi, smiled softly, calming me. I let my legs slide down from under my chin. I hadn't realized until now that Hawks was scanning my face. I hurriedly pulled up my hood to cover my hair, but it was too late. Aren't you that kid on the news? Izuku Midoriya. Hawks asked, concern in his eyes. Please. Don't take me to the police station. I spoke in a distressed tone, panic evident in my eyes. But kid, your mother is worried sick about you, Hawks said seriously, staring at me. I can't go back. Not now. Seeing their confused looks, I explained everything that had happened, omitting the fact that I was quirkless. No one likes me. I tried to make them, but now I'm here. A tear rolled down my cheek, and I wiped it away hurriedly. I just wanted to be a hero. But no one believes I can. What's your quirk, kid? Toga asked, her expression curious. I glanced up, an upset look on my face. I'm quirkless, I mumbled. Well, kid, you need a quirk to be a hero. But there is something you could be instead that is just as good as being a hero, Dabi said, a grin spreading across his face. You could be a vigilante instead. Izuku age, 16. Flashback, a vigilante. What's that? Vigilantes are people who save others, but they are illegal because they don't have a hero license. It's a ridiculous rule. Mind your language, Dabi. He's just a kid, Hawks interjected, playfully slapping Dabi across the head. Dabi responded with puppy eyes. But it's true. Kid, you don't care if I swear, do? Nope, I don't care. To emphasize his point, Dabi jumped up, made a rude gesture at Hawks, and took me onto the roof through a small skylight. So, kid, he said, laying back on the roof and gazing at the stars, you're gonna need a disguise, you know. What do you want it to be? Disguise? Well, you can't walk around like that. You're at the top of the missing list because of your age and circumstances. So, I need to change my name. And how I look. Yep. Technically, you'd need 2 disguises if you became a vigilante. Oh, right. Would you help me become one, Dabi? Please see. Before I do, you need to get an everyday disguise. I'll get Toga and Hawks to help as well. If they blab about you, well, you don't want to know what I'll do to them. A grin spread across his face as he sat up, hearing the others coming onto the roof. Right, guys, let's get started helping out our little friend. Over the next few weeks, they completely changed my life. They gave me a new name, Neo, to signify my change of life. They made me a fake BRH certificate so I could get a day job. Dabi helped me dye my hair to a whitish gray and got me colored contacts that made my eyes dark brown, though some green showed through at times. Hawks, when he wasn't working, helped me fix up the apartment building, transforming it into one of the most amazing places. We even managed to fix up rooms on the lower floors for others. Hawks had to stay in his apartment to avoid suspicion. Izuku, you're gonna be late for your job. Hurry up. Demon Dabi, shut it. People will hear you. I trudged into the living area and checked my hair in the mirror. Need to get more hair dye. Some green is showing through. Zuzu catch. I spun around to see a lunch bag flying towards me, tossed by a grinning toga in the doorway. I caught it and smirked back. I'm heading off now. I'll see you guys later. Bye. Bye, Zuzu. CYA. Grabbing a cap, I left the apartment block and walked down the back alleys, pulling the hat on. After about 10 minutes, I approached my workplace, a simple cafe open from 5:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. I worked the earliest shift from 5:30 to 8 a.m. and always came in at 5 a.m. to clean and set up. I had left late this morning and arrived at 5. Shoot. I opened the door, turned the sign around, and went to the back room to change into my uniform, a white apron with the cafe logo, a black top, trousers, and my name badge. Hearing the door open, I made sure the cap covered the green parts of my hair and went out to the front desk with the pastry tray. Morning, Neo. Good morning, erase your head. Just off duty. Yes. How did it go? The usual coffee, by the way. Yes, please. Duty was rough. Tsukiko got away. He slumped forward on the counter, visibly exhausted. I filled his coffee cup and handed it to him, smiling to myself. Last night had been a close call, and he had chased me for 2 hours, catching me in his scarf once and leaving a cut just above my eyebrow from losing my balance on the rooftops. I came home late to a panicked toga and a very loud Dabi. Got any leads on who he is yet? I saw that he was on the news yesterday evening. Wasn't it something about him saving a young girl from a fire? No leads yet, unfortunately. All we know is that he is a male, about 5 feet 9 inches, and roughly 20 to 25 years old. But that could be wrong entirely. I nodded, and he went to take a seat at a table in the corner as customers started arriving. Erase your head POV Neo seemed a bit off this morning. It wasn't out of the ordinary, but he seemed overly tired today and was wearing a cap indoors. It might just be overwork, and the cap could be a new part of the uniform. Hello, Sensei. I didn't know this was your morning coffee place. I looked up from my coffee and saw young Uraraka and Tsuyu walking over, smiling. Hello, why are you here so early? Our train arrived early, and Tsu said this was a nice little coffee shop she came to after school sometimes, so we decided to check it out. Ah, I see. Oh, hello again, Neo. Sorry to disturb your discussion, but would you ladies like some drinks or pastries? I'll have a hot chocolate, please, Mr. Neo. What about you? I'll have the same, please. Okay. I'll bring it over shortly. Tsuyu looked after him, confused. What is it, Tsu? Uraraka asked, gazing at her friend with a worried expression. Oh, nothing. I've just never seen him here before. That's because he works the early shift every day. He's the only one who does, and he gets the most pay for it since he works alone. Wow, Mr. Aizawa, you sure know a lot about him. I've been coming here for about 3 years, and since I'm usually the first to arrive, we get to chat a lot. Here's your drinks. Have a nice day. Neo returned, handing the drinks to the girls in travel cups. If you come back, bring those cups as they are reusable, and you can get a free pastry when you do. Okay, thanks, Mr. Neo. See you at school, Mr. Aizawa. Izuku POV I went back to the counter and sat down. Pulling out my notebook, I opened my phone and scrolled through the news to see if there were any reports on new heroes and villains. I came across an article on Tsukiko. Opening it, I saw a video with the caption, Tsukiko caught on camera. The video showed me sitting on a rooftop with someone beside me. It was dark, so you couldn't tell who it was, but the only reason they knew it was me was because of my white hair. It was only about 20 seconds long, as I had turned around, alerted Dabi, and jumped off the rooftop. I shivered slightly at how clear my face was in the video. I checked the time and saw it was 8:03 a.m. Eraserhead was the only person left in the cafe, so I went out back, changed out of my uniform, grabbed my bag and returned to the counter. Blossom will be here soon, Eraserhead, so I'll be heading off to run some errands. See you tomorrow. I stuffed my notebook into my bag. See you tomorrow, Neo. I waved merrily at him and left the cafe. Well, I think he caught on that I never wear a cap and I'm overly tired. I wandered down the road and came to a convenience store. Entering, I bought some hair dye and contacts, along with soba, bread, honey, and fruit as we were running low. That'll be yen, please. I handed over the money and thanked the store clerk. As I passed by the newspaper stall, I picked one up. The title read, House Fire Kills the Last of the Midoriya Family. Izuku POV, sir. Are you okay, sir? I looked down and saw a young child looking up at me with a worried expression. I realized I had tears running down my face. Wait, I'm okay, kid. I wiped the tears away. Eri, where did you go? I'm here, Papa. Bye, mister. She ran off towards a man with black hair and a gray scarf, hugging him tightly. I could partially hear her and saw her turn around and point to me. The man looked up from her and saw me. It was Eraserhead. I pulled my hood over my cap and started walking in the other direction, not wanting him to question me. I had made it halfway down the street when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Panicking, I started to run, tears blurring my vision. I turned the corner and collided with someone. Looking up, I saw it was Endeavor. My eyes widened with fear, and I hurriedly got up and ran off again. Hey, watch where you're going, kid. I could still hear Eraserhead behind me. I turned down an alleyway I had been to many times before. Eraserhead POV. I followed the kid down the alley, Endeavor's shouts echoing down the street. What is this kid running for? The kid turned a corner and sped down a different alley. It had rained the night before, leaving large puddles along the sides and middle. Up ahead, the kid skidded along the alley, and his hood fell down, revealing bright white hair. Neo! Is that you? Come back here. He steadied himself, pulled his hood up again quickly, and took off running. I chased after him, calling out for him to come back. He turned down an adjacent alley, and I slid on some damp cardboard, missing the turn. By the time I got back to the alley entrance, Neo had vanished. There were so many different alleys he could have taken that I didn't know which one to follow. Izuku POV. I ran through the alleys, twisting and turning before realizing I had lost Eraserhead. The sun was high in the sky, but dark clouds were starting to form. I walked through the alleys until I reached the main road. I sighed, secured my hood, and walked down the road with my head hanging low. I stopped to check that I still had the food and found my hand wrapped tightly around the newspaper. I let my hand relax and took a deep breath. After a few minutes, I continued walking. Hawk's POV. Dang, Tsukiko. You're going to get yourself caught if you don't pay attention. I flexed my wings as I watched him walk down the street. From my perch on the roof, I could see he was heading back home. From the corner of the street, I could see a disturbance. I flew up and glided over to another building. A group of people was talking in the shadows between two buildings. I was about to dismiss them as a bunch of teens when I noticed they were speaking into a microphone and wearing masks. Although they weren't doing anything illegal, I was about to contact my agency when they spread out, surrounding a kid, Izuku. I flew down to the ground and landed behind them. They hadn't noticed me yet, but Izuku had. His eyes were locked on me, and he was struggling against one who had him in a chokehold. I gave him a look, telling him not to fight back. Any pro hero who saw him would recognize his fighting style. He was still struggling, his face contorted in pain, but he nodded slightly, showing he understood. I cleared my throat. Excuse me, but what do you think you're doing? The F.K. you think, bird brain. Now that's not very nice, is it? I spread my wings slightly, covering the movement of calling for backup since I couldn't take on a dozen of them at once. Now why don't you let the young man go, and we can be on our way? I don't think so. You see, we need a kid for our boss, and he looks about right for the job. The man laughed, but his expression darkened. In the dimly lit street, the air hung heavy with tension. 12 unknown assailants surrounded Izuku, their eyes glinting with malice. Izuku's heart raced as he assessed the situation. He could fight back, but that might reveal who he was if a pro-hero arrived. Suddenly, the sound of powerful wings cut through the silence. Pro-hero Hawks descended from above, his fierce wings creating gusts that sent the assailants stumbling backward before he landed. Hawk's eyes locked onto Izuku, and he nodded, a silent warning not to fight back. Excuse me, but what do you think you're doing? The F.K. you think, bird brain. Now that's not very nice, is it? He spread his wings slightly, covering the movement of calling for backup. Now why don't you let the young man go, and we can be on our way? I don't think so. You see, we need a kid for our boss, and he looks about right for the job. I don't want this to get ugly for you, so just let the kid go. But the attackers lunged at Hawks, each unleashing their quirks. A woman with metallic skin extended her arms, forming sharp blades. Hawks dodged, narrowly avoiding the deadly slashes. A man with elastic limbs stretched toward Izuku, ensnaring him. Hawks swooped down, his wings slicing through the air. He sent 3 of the attackers flying into the wall, knocking them unconscious. Hawk's mind raced. He needed a plan. He spotted a man with telekinesis lifting debris from the ground. The telekinetic assailant hurled chunks of concrete at him, but Hawks weaved between them, adrenaline fueling his movements. He fought against them, his wings a shield. He unleashed feather blades, slicing through the attackers. But more kept coming, each with a different quirk. A woman with plant manipulation sprouted thorny vines, aiming to ensnare Hawks. He flew up, twisting in midair to avoid the deadly embrace. Then Endeavor arrived, standing behind the attacker holding Izuku. His towering figure radiated heat, flames dancing along his body. The number 1 hero's eyes locked onto Izuku, who was unaware of his presence. Endeavor grabbed the back of the assailant's neck, surprising him. The assailant lost consciousness and dropped Izuku. Endeavor's quirk roared to life as he knocked the remaining assailants down, their quirks fizzling out. Izuku watched in awe as Endeavor's flames illuminated the darkness. Endeavor looked down at Izuku, who was rubbing his neck and coughing. Hawks knelt beside him, whispering to calm him down. How did you get into that situation? Izuku spluttered slightly before answering, his voice shaky. I don't know. I was just walking and I was surrounded. That man came up behind me and grabbed me. He went into a coughing fit, still feeling the grip on his neck. Where are you going, kid? Do you need medical attention? Hawks asked, concern evident as his wings slowly pieced themselves back together. No, I'm okay. I just need to get home to my mom. Okay, kid, get home safely. Izuku turned and walked over to his bag, which had been thrown partway down the street during the fight. His trouser leg had been slightly ripped, exposing a scar on his thigh. How'd you get the scar, kid? Bike accident. He picked up the bag, put his hands in his pockets, and continued walking before stopping. He turned his head slightly, thanks. Dabi Pyun. Later that same day I sat on the sofa across from Toga. She was redoing Izuku's hair dye and had just put it in a hairnet to cover his hair fully as it had gotten quite long. So Izuku, how was your day today? Oh, it was okay, I guess. He hung his head slightly and fiddled with the zipper of his hoodie, filling the room with an irritating noise. I leaned forward on the sofa and glared at him. Izuku, what happened? Toga had stopped fiddling with the hair dye, now realizing how serious I was being. He sighed and reached for the bag that was strewn on the floor beside the sofa. Grabbing inside it, he pulled out a bundle of paper and threw it so it landed at my feet. Picking it up, I saw the headline, and my hands started shaking slightly. Newspaper article last night, Inko Midoriya, the last remaining member of the Midoriya family, died in a house fire. At the time, she was at an associate's house when a villain attack occurred just outside the residence. One of these villains had a gas quirk, and unfortunately, the homeowners had candles burning, causing the gas to catch fire. We believe there are no other casualties but are unable to confirm at this time. 3 others were harmed in the fire: Katsuki Bakugo, Mitsuki Bakugo, and Masaru Bakugo. They have suffered severe burns but are to be questioned in case they know any information about the villains. Police think there might be a connection to a closed case regarding the disappearance of Izuku Midoriya, who went missing almost 6 years ago. This could mean that Inko had information on what happened to Izuku, suggesting he might still be alive. The article ended by discussing the temperatures expected to drop into the negatives by next week, making it the coldest it has been in Japan at this time of year since, I'm guessing you read the whole thing. I looked up from the newspaper to find Toga reading the article over my shoulder, showing no sign of emotion on her face. Izuku was watching us, curiosity etched across his face. What's so curious, Zuzu? Toga had looked up now, puzzled by his expression. Oh, nothing. I was just wondering if my old man was still here, if he had died in the fire as well. He shrugged slightly, then leaned back against the opposite sofa as I roared with laughter. One main thing Izuku and I had in common was our absolute hatred for our fathers. His had abused him from the age of 4 to 8, only stopping when he left for business. Mine had used me and then ignored me for my younger siblings. Except when I got burned. I felt a slap around the back of my head, making me bite my tongue. What the? Hyox? I grinned. He leaned down and gave me a hug. I blushed slightly before sending Izuku a death glare as he made weird faces at us. You on patrol tonight, Izuku? Hawks stood up and walked to Toga, handing her a pastry. Thanks for the hospitality after I nearly got you caught the other night. Sorry about that, by the way. I don't care. I got free sugar food. She patted Hawks on the head and walked off, leaving him slightly shocked while Izuku and I stuffed our fists in our mouths to stifle our laughter at Hawks' expression. So, are you on patrol tonight? Quickly regaining composure, Izuku sat up and fiddled with the hair cap. I'm not going to miss it. I think Aizawa will have a heart attack if I did. The only times I missed it, I left a note just to annoy him. He grinned. I'll be leaving after Toga helps me wash my hair out since I can't see the back of my head, but she can. Well, have fun. Endeavor is trailing Erase Your Head tonight, so be on high alert. Gotcha, Hawks. See you soon. Izuku then got up and left to find Toga, who a few minutes later came back through the room covered in powdered sugar, grumbling to herself as a flustered Izuku trailed behind her with an angry red mark on his face. Well then, I can guess what has happened. Hawk's eyes followed them as they walked across the room. He then sat on the sofa and leaned his back against my shoulder, his wings curled around him like a blanket. Izuku. In the kitchen small skip back I opened the door to the kitchen and saw Toga leaning against the island with her back to me. Seeing an opportunity, I walked up slowly, quietly behind her. Leaning across the island counter, I got ready to pounce. After a few seconds, I wrapped one hand around her face and the other on her shoulder. I hadn't realized that she was holding something and soon, a white dust cloud billowed out around her, and something hit the floor. Before I could react, she twisted my hand off her shoulder and ducked away from me. Before I could say anything, I was sent tumbling backward after receiving a punch on the side of the face from a very angry Toga. That hurt. I put on a whiny voice and made a sad puppy face at her, receiving a sarcastic eye roll as she tugged me out of the room. We are doing your hair, and I am styling it for you now since you made me drop my donut. Instead of pointing out where I still had excess hair dye, Toga seemed to choose chaos, which was mainly my fault, but I wouldn't tell the others that. I rinsed out my hair and asked Toga if I had missed a spot. Yeah, you got one here. Let me get it for you. She checked the water in the tub, making sure it was the right temperature. Lean your head over the bowl for me, will ya? I leaned my head over the bowl. This go, my next words were cut off as Toga submerged my head in the water. I inhaled what felt like half the bucket before she let go. I got it. Your hair is all done now, Zuku. I glared at her around the towel I was using to dry my face. Toga rolled up her sleeve and checked the time. Oops, Izuku, it's 6, you have less than half an hour to start your patrol. I groaned and left the bathroom. From the corner of my eye, I saw Dabi and Hawks sleeping on the sofa. Smiling to myself, I went to get ready for patrol. Aizawa/Erase Your Head POV, where is he? The one time I was on time, he's late. I stood in the shadows of a small water tower atop an apartment block overlooking the main city. I could see why Tsukiko used it as a lookout. You could see all of the alleys, streets, and buildings for miles around. Rude to spy, you know. I spun around to find I was face to face with Tsukiko. He had his mask pulled up over his face, but I could tell that he was grinning ear to ear. He stared at me for a few seconds before walking past me, bumping his shoulder against mine. He was at least a head shorter than me and quite a bit skinnier, but he was powerful. Appealing, isn't it? I turned to see what he was looking at. The sun was setting over the horizon, casting an orange glow over the city. Stars were beginning to appear in the sky, dotting it with small pinpricks of light. I guess so, Tsukiko. Thought you were more of a night person, though. Not a kid. Call me Tsukiko. He stood just on the edge of the roof, his gaze fixed on a building not far away. I followed it and saw what he was looking at. A red glaze had come over the dark side of a building. I sighed and shook my head. Tsukiko heard this and laughed, throwing his head back. His laughter echoed across the city. It was bubbly yet eerie at the same time, and I shivered slightly. Scare you, do I? Don't be scared. I don't bite. He peered over his shoulder at me, grinning slyly. This kid must have a sensor quirk or something like that. You are very readable, you know. You can't hide any secrets from me. You're like an open book that I can't stop reading. Then again, most people are these days. Oh, so trusting of everyone. Except those who don't fit the standards, of course. He turned back towards me and crouched down on the edge of the building, his eyes nearly piercing through me. Maybe a mind-reading quirk then. Why are you a vigilante? Why not a hero? Ask me some other time. I have something to take care of real quick. With that, he stood up, gave me a small salute, and stepped backward off the side of the building. I rushed to the edge to find him on a lower rooftop running towards a catacomb of alleyways. How did you not die? That's a 6th-floor drop. What is wrong with this kid? A loud thump behind me made me turn around to find Endeavor walking up to me. He saw me, didn't he? Yes. What would you expect from the top vigilante in Japan? Possibly even the best in Asia. Dang, he seems familiar. I feel like I've seen him before. Lots of people have white hair, and we can't see his lower face, so there's no way to tell who he is. Where is he? Just jumped off the building. He what? I shrugged, quite normal. Usually it's just from 2 blocks high, though. Must have been something important. Shouldn't we be tailing him then? I put my hand over my eyes and groaned. How does he manage this every time? Izuku, here ma'am, take this. It's some water to do. Drink it slowly, and if you feel dizzy at all, call the doctors or ask someone for help. I'm not sure what type of gas that was, but it wasn't poison from what I know. You're okay now, don't worry. Thanks. My name is Tsukiko, ma'am. If you go to the police tomorrow, give them the message that Tsukiko beat them to the job again. Goodbye now. I stepped away from her and watched her down the alley to the main road, making sure she made it there safely. What to do with you 3? I turned to the huddle of people in the corner of the alley where minutes before they had cornered the poor lady. We are sorry. Please don't kill us. Please. I won't kill you, don't worry. I'm not like those heroes who think they are above the law and can kill. But I am going to hand you over to the police station, as armed assault is illegal. I tapped my chin, grinning at their terror. How best to take you there? Gunpoint seems a little drastic, but I might. How the hell are you so fast? I groaned and turned around. Busy right now, so go away please. I looked at their dumbfounded faces and nodded slightly before turning back to the huddle, who looked relieved to see the heroes and petrified that they were not stopping me. I'll leave the heroes to clean up this mess, I think. It's their job after all. CYA fellas. I nodded my head at them before turning around to find Endeavor blocking my path. Well, more fighting for me, I guess. How fun. Endeavor pulled back his fist, glowing with red-hot embers. As the fist started to move towards me, I yawned, bored of the hero. I ducked his fist, not fast enough, though, as it caught the top of my head, singeing my hair. I kicked out my leg, wrapping it around Endeavor's. Say good night, sir. I made his leg buckle, sending him into the wall, cracking his head against it and knocking him out. 1 down, 1 to go. I stood up and stretched my arm slightly, loosening the fabric on it as I had received a cut to the arm from one of the men behind me while I was saving the woman. I need to get this over with so I can get back to the apartment to patch myself up. Suddenly, I felt something snaking around my waist and torso. I went to move to the side when it tightened. Gotcha, Tsukiko. Smart to use your scarf on me when I'm distracted, old man. Old man. The nerve this kid has. Not a scarf and not an old man. Tsukiko wasn't paying attention to me and was fiddling with the scarf, trying to loosen it. I tugged it, sending him falling to the ground. You made an error, raise your head. This voice was different from Tsukiko's, so I looked around to see who was talking. A knife came flying out of the darkness, striking my upper right shoulder. I stumbled back slightly before pulling out the knife. It wasn't one of those makeshift ones. It was a proper handcrafted one. It worked well, unlike others, as a dark stain was appearing on my clothing. I groaned slightly at the pain before feeling my capture weapon go slack. Glancing sideways, I saw Tsukiko standing in front of the 3 villains behind me, binding them in a rope of some sort. Ah, come on, erase your head. Don't you want to have a little knife play with me? It would make me so happy. I could see the shadows shifting in the darkness, a small glint of light hovering a few feet from the ground. Another knife. I tensed up. A low whistle sounded from next to me, not one of assurance, though one of warning. Tsukiko's eyes were on me. Once he was sure I was paying attention, he motioned towards Endeavor, warning me he could be in trouble if not protected. You guys are no fun. I guess I'll choose a game then. How about one involving lots of yummy BLD? The shadows shifted again, and another knife came flying out of it towards Tsukiko. He stepped aside, it grazing his cheek, causing his mask to tear. He reached up and wiped away the BLD spilling out of his wound, holding his hand in front of his face as if to check the BLD was real with a scared look before letting his hand fall limply to his side. His eyes were locked on the place the knife had come from. A wave of unease washed over me, seeing how tense he was. That's a shame, isn't it? The voice was behind me now. I turned and was pushed against the wall. A girl stood in front of me, a large grin on her face. She held a knife against my throat, the blade cutting into my skin. Your BLD looks so yummy and it is caffeinated as well. It's such a nice treat. I looked past her for Tsukiko but I couldn't see him. The girl had a syringe in her hand now and was examining me. Now let's see if this works, shall we? She raised the syringe before she went limp. A strange mist filled the air, a purple tinge to it. The girl collapsed in front of me. Sorry, erasure. Tsukiko was standing in front of me. He was talking, but the world had gone quiet and then went dark. Chapter Tsukiko's POV. Ugh. My head feels so heavy. I stretched my hand slightly, and a pain shot up my arm. I winced and felt something rough against my face. Using my left arm, I pushed myself onto my knees and opened one eye as far as I could, which wasn't very far. It was daybreak, at least 4:30 in the morning, with an orange-red glow in the sky. I groaned as I tried to stand, using a wall to steady myself. I'm still in the alleyway. I looked towards the corner and saw the villains still there, looking like ghosts, pale, their gaze fixed on something behind me. I looked to the ground, covered in red stains. Slowly, I opened my other eye and followed a trail of fresh BLD toward a figure standing some distance away by Endeavor, who, from what I could tell, was still out cold. Glad you're awake, erase your head. I need to get going now. The voice was Tsukiko's. I recognized it easily, although my head still felt heavy. My eyes traveled away from Endeavor and landed on a truly horrifying sight. Tsukiko. What happened? My voice broke off. He stood there with a girl who must be about his age, leaning against him. He had one arm covering her head, so I couldn't see it, but that wasn't what I was focusing on. Tsukiko's normally pure white hair was stained red with BLD, pouring down the side of his face and drenching his clothing. His goggles had cracked, and he leaned against the wall for support. His clothing was covered in rips and tears, revealing a large scar across his torso. He had many smaller cuts across his arms and legs, and his eyes were shaking rapidly, unable to focus. I'm fine. Just a few scratches. He started to back away from me, still holding onto the girl. Tsukiko, what are you doing? You're injured. Come with me to the hospital. I started forward, but he backed off even faster. Endeavor stirred next to me and sat up. What's happening? Are you alright, Eraserhead? He looked up at me, seeing the panic on my face. I raised my hand and put it over my mouth, trying not to scream at Tsukiko to come back. He had stopped, seeing Endeavor awaken as if to make sure he was okay. As Endeavor stood to confront the villains, Tsukiko started to back away when he suddenly stumbled and hit the wall. Endeavor turned and went still. What the? He mumbled, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. Tsukiko bolted, holding the girl to his chest as he ran down a different alleyway. I chased after him, and so did Endeavor. Hawks, are you there? We need help now. Tsukiko's injured badly, and he's bolted. He has a girl with him, but I think she might be injured as well. Hawks, we need you to look from above. I spoke quickly and panicked through the earpiece, contacting Hawks on a private channel. Right on, Eraserhead. Hawks responded, and we soon heard him flying above us. Endeavor raised an arm and motioned that Tsukiko went southeast through another alley. Hawks motioned back and flew off in that direction. I stopped at an intersection that split into 3 different paths, all heading in opposite directions. I had no clue where to go as we lost sight of Tsukiko, and there wasn't a trail to follow. Hawks, have you got him? Negative, Eraserhead. The alleys split, and some are too dark to see down. He must be fine, though, if he can get away that fast. You're right. Come back to us, Hawks. We'll meet on the rooftops. Izuku, don't worry, Toga. We'll be home soon. I pressed her head against me, supporting her as I ran. I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve as BLD ran down, half blinding me. I took deep breaths, trying to calm myself down. I was hurt badly, but the adrenaline kept the pain at bay. I looked up and saw Hawks above us, flying low and scanning the area. I dodged into an empty parking lot. Even though he was a friend, he was also a hero, sent out to capture me and Toga. My footsteps echoed slightly in the car park. A booming noise repeated over and over. My head throbbed along with my footsteps, getting louder and more painful the longer I ran. I reached the exit of the parking lot. I had a few more blocks to go. No rest. Can't rest. Must keep going. I repeated that in my head, keeping me focused and aware of my surroundings. This area was one of the most crime-infested places in Japan, which meant there was always a hero on patrol. I wasn't sure who was on duty at this time, as I was usually home by 3 a.m. and out of the house by 5:20 a.m., making this the dead point of my schedule. It was the only time of day I didn't have a lookout on the news, hero activity, or villainous occurrences. My mask was soaked, and it was getting difficult to breathe. My knees buckled beneath me, and I collapsed onto the ground, struggling to catch my breath. I tugged at my mask, fingers sliding over the soaked material. I coughed, feeling lightheaded from the BLD that was sliding down my throat. In a desperate attempt to remove the mask, I cut down one side of it haphazardly, accidentally cutting my face in the process. The mask fell aside, and I retched, expelling the BLD. I continued for several minutes before I finally stopped. My chest hurt and I felt weak. I glanced to the side and saw Toga still lying there unconscious. Unsteadily, I got to my feet, stumbling slightly and grabbing hold of a crack in the wall to stabilize myself. I tore the rest of the mask away from my face and threw it aside, wiping my hand across my forehead and seeing it slick with Billy. The world seemed to spin around me, the light brightening then dimming. I took a shaky step forward before collapsing again. I had lost too much BLD. I tried to push myself up, but I couldn't. Past Izuku, Night of Disappearance. I'm gonna finish what I started, Deku, and this time you won't be getting up for a week. Please, Kaken, I didn't mean it. I swear. He pushed me back, my bag falling from my shoulder as I hit the wall. My notebook flew out, landing by Bakugo's feet. He sneered and leaned over, picking it up and opening it to a random page. So you want this desperately? You have a notebook all on pro heroes and their quirks. That's just sad, You want to be a hero so bad. I've got a time-saving idea for you. If you think you'll have a quirk in your next life, go take a dive off the roof. Maybe you should do that too, Kaken. Maybe you'll get a brain. What did you say to me, demon nerd? I said go jump off the roof and you might get a brain. My last nerve had broken, and I could see Kaken's had as well. I slid down the wall, eyes widening as his hands started to glow eerily and his eyes darkened with malice. He grabbed my shirt, pulling my face close to his. I'm going to end you, Deku. And I'll be at your funeral, laughing, remembering the look on your face right now. He threw me back, my head cracking against the wall. I groaned, the floor spinning below me. I felt another blow to the side of my head, sending me onto my side. I opened my eyes and saw a kid coming towards me. They had a blade quirk, able to make any type of blade appear anywhere on their body. He sliced into my side, and I screamed in agony. Laughter echoed through the alleyway, and someone urged him to do it again. He did, again and again, until my side was riddled with wounds. When he finally stopped, I pushed myself up and saw a blurry figure kneel in front of me, head tilted to the side. Now then, let me finish you off. Kaken, please. I just want to go home. Go to hell, Deku. I saw flashes of light and felt a searing pain in my chest. I howled in pain, BLD dripping from my mouth, half blinded by the BLD flowing from my head. Sheet, Bakugo. I think you actually killed him. What the hell, man? I thought you were kidding. Freak, no. I'm outta here. Echoes of shouts and panic filled the air as Kaken backed away, his figure rigid and trembling. I lay there, clutching my chest and head, shaking uncontrollably. He said something, but it sounded distant. I keeled over, and the world went dark. Izuku POV, is he waking up? Izuku, you're alive. Don't do that ever again. Quick, call Hawks. He's gonna freak out. On it. I felt someone wrap their arms around me, hugging me tightly. I winced, my head feeling heavy and my arms stinging. Dabi. You scared us, Izuku. What happened? Toga went out to find you to warn you that the pros had stations all around the area you were patrolling. She found you with 2 heroes. Then she blacked out. When she woke up, she found you lying in a pool of BLD, unconscious. She thought you had died from BLD loss. How long was I out? Almost 2 weeks. Wow. No kidding, Sherlock. I had your boss call me since I was your guardian to see where you were. I told her you had the flu, and she believed me since the temperature dropped a lot while you were out. Dabi looked away, pretending to fix my blankets, but I could see he was wiping his eyes. I pretended not to notice. What time is it? About 6:30, I think. But I slid out of bed and tried standing. Realizing I could and didn't have any pain, I walked toward the door before feeling Dabi tug me back onto the bed. Hell no, Izuku. I'm not letting you leave the house now. You nearly died on us. No way you're going to patrol tonight. Wait a few days. Dabi, I can't. What if someone needs help? Please let me go. I struggled against his grip, trying to break free. Damn you, Dabi, let me go. Izuku, listen. Your arm is broken. You've had 3 different sets of stitches. You nearly punctured a lung. His voice cracked, and his grip tightened around me, hugging me close while avoiding the painful areas. Okay, Dabi. I won't go. Promise. I promise. Good. I'll go get you some food and water. He let go of me and got up, looking exhausted and barely able to keep his eyes open. He shut the door behind him, and I heard him enter the kitchen and talk to Toga about something. I'm sorry, Dabi, but it's my duty. Aizawa POV, after meeting up with Hawks, they went to the police station. Can't you get security camera footage, Tsukachi? No, Aizawa. Access to people's video doorbells. No, we can. Talk to the locals. Shota, listen to me. I stopped pacing and looked at him. We have tried everything. There is no sign of him, where he went, or anything. You need to calm down now. Please. Your worrying won't help us find him. He sighed and rested his head in his hands, turning off his laptop screen. I had been pestering him for almost 5 hours straight, looking over his shoulder and occasionally taking his laptop, thinking I saw Tsukiko on a camera or that I had a sudden idea. I knew I had been a pain, but I was so worried about him. The door clicked open behind us, and Tsukachi raised his head. Hello, Hawks. Why so down, Tsukachi? Long night. Very long. Is that coffee? He eyed the tray of mugs in Hawk's hands. Extra strong, as I'm guessing Aizawa has been going into dad mode since we got back. Huh. Oh yes, he has, Hawks. No, stop. I'm quite annoying really, but I understand why. Tsukiko has dropped the crime rate by over half in the last few years. Hawks offered me a steaming mug, and I accepted it graciously. It was scalding hot, but I drank it quickly, glad to have some caffeine. Tsukachi also accepted his coffee and picked up his phone after receiving an email. Halfway through taking a sip, he suddenly choked and spat it out, spraying it over Hawks, who jumped up in the air, knocking over a table with his wings. Aizawa, we have something. Come look. I hurried to his side as he projected the camera footage onto the large screen. Hawks stood beside us, grumbling quietly. I gave him a look and he soon stopped. Tsukachi played the video. It showed Tsukiko carrying a girl who looked roughly his age, maybe slightly younger. She wasn't moving, but we could tell she was alive by Tsukiko's movements. He suddenly dropped the girl, moving a few steps before collapsing. He was fiddling with his mask, choking and retching. His fingers slid across the fabric, BLD covering his hands. He took out a knife from a pocket in his trousers, sliding it across one side of his mask, pulling it away. He retched again, BLD spilling from his mouth. His face was pale, a large scratch down one side and a scar on the other. He went on in this condition for about 5 minutes before glancing to the side to check the girl was okay. He stood up before tumbling sideways, grabbing onto the wall for support. He threw his mask aside before wiping his forehead with the back of his hand, pulling it back to see it covered in BLD. His body went limp at that moment, and he fell sideways, crashing to the floor. The tape stays like this until about 6:30 a.m. before it changes. Tsukachi spoke as he skipped forward in the tape. The girl's body twitched slightly before she rolled onto her back, wiping her cheek, which had BLD stains on it. She sat up and looked around before seeing Tsukiko laying about 10 feet away. From her, surrounded by a pool of oh no. Are you okay? Izuku, can you hear me? Her voice was cracked and slightly muffled through the video, but you could tell that she was terrified. Izuku. Oh no. This is bad. She crawled forward and grabbed his wrist, presumably feeling for a pulse. She heaved a deep sigh before sitting Tsukiko up against her, wiping his forehead with her sleeve. She looked down at his chest and screamed, short and loud. The girl fumbled with his chest before pulling her hand away, a bloody knife in it. She heaved him up, wrapping one of his arms around her shoulders. She turned around, her face covered in shadow. She gazed right at the camera, eyes wide. The videotape cut, the last frame showing a dagger flying towards it. I turned to Hawks. His hands were over his mouth, eyes wide. He mumbled something inaudible and hurried out of the room, wiping his eyes. Tsukachi was in shock but also had an impressed look on his face. The hell are you smiling about? Tsukiko's injured and is probably knocking on death's door. Well, Aizawa. We know Tsukiko's identity and what his face looks like. Very smart of him, the way he positioned himself and the girl. Hiding both of their faces, only showing half of his at a time. He must have known there was a camera. However, the girl didn't know, revealing Tsukiko's face and also his name to us. Unfortunately, we could not identify the girl as she was mostly covered in shadow. I watched as Tsukachi rewound the video. He was right. Tsukiko's face was bathed in light, and we could see it fully. The girl said his name is Izuku, so all we need to do now is look up who this Izuku might be. We can also look out for him on the streets since we know what he looks like. He opened a search browser and typed in the name Izuku. A news report from 5 years ago appeared on the screen. I don't think this is Tsukiko. It says he was most likely murdered just outside of his school or kidnapped. His full name is Izuku Midoriya. Wait, Midoriya? There was a report on this recently. I took the laptop from him and searched for Midoriya's death. It came up with the death of Inko Midoriya, mother of Izuku Midoriya. It says she died in a house fire. However, it wasn't her house, so we need to find out whose it is, as they most likely have information on Izuku. I wonder why you aren't one of the top heroes, Aizawa. You know much more than others do. Hawks re-entered the room at that moment, his eyes bloodshot. He avoided eye contact, and I didn't question it. I knew he blamed himself for this. He had been tailing Tsukiko and lost him. I nodded to him as Tsukachi explained what they had learned about Tsukiko. Hawk's eyes widened behind his glasses. Present day, 8 p.m. eyesight. Tsukiko hadn't been on patrol for the past 2 weeks, and we hadn't gotten any closer to finding out who he actually was, as Izuku Midoriya hadn't been sighted in the past 5 years. I was sitting on a lower rooftop, waiting for a sign of movement when I heard a low whistle from the roof of the higher building. Confused, I used my capture weapon to scale the side of the building, landing less than gracefully on the roof. It had rained the night before and the water had frozen, causing me to slip and nearly fall. Regaining my balance, I looked around. There was a figure sitting on the edge of the roof, one leg hanging over the edge, the other drawn to their chest. Walking closer, I saw the green streaks on their clothing. Glad to see you're okay, Eraserhead. Sorry for scaring you. He hadn't turned around, so I had no idea how he had realized it was me. And I'm glad that you're back up on your feet. Heh, not entirely, sir. I came up next to him and sat down. What do you mean by that? I looked at him. His face was half covered in shadow, but I could see that he had a bandage over his forehead. His arms had scratches up and down them. That isn't the worst of them, you know. He was watching my face as I looked at the bandages, scratches, and scars. I won't run tonight as my chest feels like it would explode from pain, so if you don't capture me, or we try to capture me, I won't run. Why did the girl call you Izuku? Straight to it then. He turned away from me and sighed, looking up at the stars. Izuku is my BRH name. However, as stated in the newspaper 5 years ago, Izuku Midoriya. You can ask 2 more questions tonight if you wish. I will answer them if I feel they won't give my true self away. I nodded slightly, and we sat in silence for a while. Why did you fake your death? Asked the son of the Bakugos. Very well, Tsukiko. He coughed and wiped his mouth, a small bloodstain on the back of his hand. He gave a small laugh and stretched. Strange how he doesn't care that he is hurt. Still, how is he alive? Who was that girl? The one you hid her face from us in the alley. I suspected he would ignore me, but to my surprise, he answered, choosing his words carefully. She is my older sister and one of my saviors. She was one of the people who saved me all those years ago, and they are the only ones who truly care about me. He's being careful with the information he is giving me. He does look familiar, but I can't figure out who. Can I ask one more question? Sure. He turned to face me, one arm wrapped around his chest. How do you pay for your equipment? I work in a... He cut off mid-sentence and glared at me. Nice try, Aizawa, but you won't get me that easily. He stood up, still holding his chest, and gazed over the city. I suggest you start your patrol. There are signs of fights tonight in that area. He pointed behind me and I turned to look. How do you know that? No answer. Tsukiko. I turned back, but he was gone. That kid is way too smart for his own good. Next day, 5:35 a.m. Good morning, Eraserhead. What can I get you today? Hello, Neo. I'll have a strong black coffee, please, and a cinnamon bun. Coming right up. I was sitting at a corner table with a large number of folders and papers scattered across the table. I was the only one in the cafe at this time, but I knew that Hawks would be joining me soon to help me figure out Tsukiko's past. After a few minutes, Neo came back with my coffee and cinnamon bun. Working this early, Eraserhead. I guess that there are a lot of villains about then as this looks important. It is Neo. We have gathered information on Tsukiko and have figured out who he might be. Hawks is going to be here soon to help me. Okay, Eraserhead, I hope that your search is fruitful. He placed my mug and food on a clear part of the table before going back to the counter. He leaned against the wall there and closed his eyes. He looked exhausted but also had bountiful amounts of energy. Must be nocturnal or something. The bell above the door rang. Hawks entered with 4 students from UA, Kirishima, Kaminari, Mina, and Bakugo. Neo went into the back room as they entered. Hiya. Erase your head. Sorry I wasn't here sooner, there was a slight hold-up. Shoddy hair, you didn't tell me he came here in the mornings. Chill, Bakugo. I just forgot to mention it, you aren't acting very manly. You're nearly as clueless as Pikachu over there. I sighed, my peaceful morning was now less than peaceful, and I still had lots of work to do. Hawks came and sat across from me, picking up a pile of papers. You've been working a lot, erase your head? Yes, Tsukiko revealed some information about his past last night. What like? The girl he was with, he called her sister, but also one of my saviors. He told me that his BRH name is Izuku Midoriya, but the reason Izuku Midoriya died was because of Bakugo's son. I looked over at Bakugo as I spoke, and I saw him tense up at the mention of Izuku Midoriya. Hawks glanced over at him as well. Mina, Kirishima, and Kaminari hadn't noticed yet, they were too busy admiring the pastries the cafe had to offer. Izuku, why is he here? 5 years of not seeing him, and as soon as the pros find out about me being Izuku Midoriya, he has to appear. I was sitting on the floor of the back room, wiping down some mugs. Excuse me, sir. Are we able to order? I turned to see a girl with pink skin and hair looking through the doorway. Oh yes, sorry, I'll be out in a second. I put down my cloth and walked out to the counter. What can I get you today, sirs and ma'ams? I'll have a matcha frappe and a lemon muffin. I noted it down. What else can I get for you, sirs? So manly. I'll have a green tea and a biscuit, please. Can I have a hot chocolate, please? Of course. What about your friend? Leave me alone. Okay, I'll bring those over to you shortly. They walked away, and I went back into the room to grab some plates. I made up all the drinks and put them on a tray with the snacks. Feeling a bit rebellious, I wrote on a piece of paper, "Leave me alone," and put it in a glass. I left the back room and walked over to the table where the group was sitting. I gave them all their drinks and snacks before setting down the glass with the note in front of Katsuki. He opened the note and stood up suddenly, sending his chair flying. You little. I'm sorry, sir, but I gave you what you ordered. If you don't like it, maybe be more specific next time. The pink girl picked up the note and read it, mouthing the words. She burst out laughing and passed it around the table. I smiled at Bakugo and started to walk away when I felt something hot hit the back of my neck. I lurched forward, dropping the tray I was holding. Bakugo, what the hell? I reached toward the back of my neck and felt it was scalding hot. I winced slightly before turning around. The two boys were holding back Bakugo while the girl asked if I was okay. I mumbled a response, saying I was fine. I walked toward Bakugo and stopped in front of him. The rules of the cafe are simple. If you use your quirk on a member of staff, you will be kicked out. If you refuse, the staff can use force on you. So, what will it be? I spoke in a level voice, staring right into his eyes. He stared back at me. I shook my head slightly, moving my hair to the side, revealing a bright white scar across the side of my face. His eyes widened as he looked at it. He shook his head and mumbled that he would go. I stepped back and let him pass, watching him exit the cafe. I turned around and picked up the tray before going to the back room. Bakugo POV. He stared at me, eyes blank, face dark. He shook his head slightly, revealing a bright white scar down the side of his head. That's where Izuku got. Goddamn it, Katsuki, he is dead. Stop thinking about him. I shook off Kaminari and Kirishima. The cafe worker stepped back and adjusted his hair, covering the scar. I scowled slightly and muttered to the others that I would be outside. The bell above the door rang as I left the cafe. It was freezing outside, and I shivered slightly, pulling my jumper up over my nose. The bell rang again, and I turned to see Mr. Aizawa walking towards me by a lamppost near the door. He had a capture weapon pulled close and was holding 2 cups. Hello, Bakugo. Morning, sensei. Is it okay if I ask you a few questions? Sure. He handed me a cup of what I guessed was hot chocolate and leaned against the lamppost. You don't have to answer them if you don't want to. But if I suspect you're lying, you will be taken to the police station for proper questioning. I wasn't fazed by the questioning, but I wasn't keen on going to the police station. Mr. Aizawa nodded and sighed slightly. What do you know about Izuku Midoriya? As he said the name, I felt myself go rigid, and my hand began trembling on the cup. I frowned at myself before taking a sip of my drink, trying to hide my sudden panic. My brow furrowed. I was about to ask again when I started talking in a quiet voice, barely audible. Izuku was a kid from my school. He went missing nearly 6 years ago after. I took another sip and looked down the road at a group of people. After what? After nothing. I stumbled over my words, my voice louder and clearer, but my face darkened. Bakugo, if you know anything about what happened, you need to tell me. I stood up straight and walked in front of him, waiting for his answer. I don't know anything. He died almost 6 years ago. If I tell you this, will you tell me all that you know? What? Izuku Midoriya is alive. What? Why, you're joking. No, I'm not. But we need to find out what happened to him before we can talk to him and help him. He sighed and closed his eyes. Izuku Midoriya was diagnosed quirkless at age 4. I used to be friends with him, but after that, others turned against him. So did I. I took out a piece of paper and started noting down what he said. At first, I just ignored him, then it turned to bullying. I was one of the most popular kids at our school, and I had a group behind me, watching me torment him. He was always so into heroes, and I just made fun of him, making him think he was worthless. I was an idiot. He laughed at himself and took another drink, his eyes slightly misty. His demeanor suddenly shifted and became dark again. And then, he went missing. He looked at me confused. I'm a teacher, Bakugo. I can tell if you are lying. Tell the whole story. He glared at me, then looked to the floor. I attacked him. He whispered it so quietly I could barely hear it. I attacked him. I lost all sense. And then I ran. His eyes welled up slightly, but then he blinked and all traces of tears were gone. He told me the whole conversation about how he pushed him too far, how he had taunted him, and how he had attacked him out of fear of the truth. After seeing what he had done, he had run and not looked back or helped. His friends had stood back, laughing before running away as well. He looked up at me. Will I be a good hero? After what I did to him? He seemed panicked as he said this. No, you won't be. I'm guessing that no one else knows about this. No. Just me, my old friends, and you. Right. Do you know anything else that happened to him after this? No. I went home, and the next day at school he wasn't there. Then when I saw the news. Thank you, Bakugo. A thought suddenly came to my mind, and I frowned slightly. Bakugo's head tilted slightly, confusion written across his face. Are you okay, Mr. Aizawa? Yes, I just had a thought. Tonight, I will pick you up from the dorms. I'm going to try something. I will make sure you are safe. He nodded and turned, hearing the little bell go off as his friends exited the cafe with Hawks and Neo. They walked up to us, chattering excitedly. Hello, Neohawks. Hello, erase your head. I thought I'd come give you this since yours was forgotten about, I presume. Neo handed me a small bag with a pastry in it. He then turned to Bakugo. Here. He pushed a pastry into his hands before bowing slightly to us. Well, I must be going. I will see you tomorrow, erase your head. Goodbye, Neo. Goodbye. He stood up straight, nodded to the others, then turned around and walked down the street, humming softly to himself. Bakugo POV 7:30 p.m. that night. Hello, sir. Hello, Bakugo. Go put this on, please. He handed me my hero costume. Why do I need to wear this, sir? I'm taking you to meet someone, but I'm not sure if it is advisable to wear a uniform and use your quirk if needed. I'm fighting someone. No. It's just a precaution. Now go change. If your friends ask, say you're training. Yes, sir. Time skip brought to you by Bakugo being bombarded by questions and receiving at least 13 death threats in the span of 6 minutes. Where are we going, sir? We are going to meet someone. Okay. I ran a list of people through my mind on who we might be meeting. Nah. Izuku. What the hell is wrong with me? A hero of some sort probably. I was walking beside Mr. Aizawa, watching the corners of the streets, waiting impatiently for when we would get to the building. After about 15 minutes of walking, it began to snow, little white flakes landing on my hand as I held it out, watching them slowly disappear. I saw Mr. Aizawa watching me, a blank expression on his face until he lifted his face to the sky. We stood there for a few minutes, just watching the snow fall. I hadn't realized it at first, but we were both listening to a voice singing. It wasn't loud, but in the silence it echoed. It was sweet but also eerie the way it filled the streets. He is here. I opened my eyes and looked at Mr. Aizawa. Where? He pointed upwards to where the voice seemed to be coming from. I nodded slightly before walking up to the door of the building. No. We are going up a different way. I turned and saw him walk down an alleyway. I hurried after him and saw him pulling down a fire escape ladder. Up here, then I will direct you from there. I climbed up in front of him, listening to the instructions he was giving me until I got to the flat of a lower roof. Mr. Aizawa came up beside me, standing with one hand in his pocket, the other around his scarf. Hold up your hand above your head. Wadash, just do it. I did as he said, holding my hand high above my head, the snow causing small streams of water to run down my arm. Mr. Aizawa whispered something, then I felt a tug on my arm, lifting me off the ground. I gasped and wrapped my hand around the thing that was holding me wrist. I looked up and saw Hawks grinning down at me. Nice seeing you up here, young Bakugo. It was dark here, but I could tell he was grinning, oversized wings beating the air in a rhythm. I grunted and looked down. Snow swirled around me and fell to the ground, covering the streets below in a white blanket. Hawks flew me up to the top of the building and set me down before landing beside me. Mr. Aizawa joined us a minute later, stumbling slightly on a thin sheet of ice. A laugh echoed from the edge of the roof. The singing had stopped and I could see the outline of a figure walking towards us. Hawks and Mr. Aizawa had stepped back into the shadows where I couldn't see them. I turned back towards the person and felt them grab me by the front of my shirt and dragging me over to the side of the building. I gave out a shout and then felt my feet leave the floor again. Hello, Kaken, and this chapter feels like it is a lot shorter than the others, but it is about the same length. I had writer's block and I restarted this chapter about 3 times, so it might not be the best. Anyways, here is the fact. Katsuki Bakugo was originally going to be a nerdy person, no offense, who insulted everyone. Also, if Bakugo doesn't walk in a weird way, it is Toga. Chapter end is Izuku. Hello, Kaken. I had a hold of him by the front of his hero costume, dangling him over the side of the 50-something story building. I pulled down my mask and grinned at him, making sure to leave the little mic inside so they could recognize my voice. Bakugo's hands were grabbing a hold of my wrist, trying to get back to safety. The snow fell around us, drifting to the ground. I shivered slightly as the snow landed on my bare arm. I shifted my grip slightly, Bakugo going further off the edge. Is the little Kaken scared? His eyes widened, then closed to slits, glaring at me. His hands warmed up against my wrist. I wouldn't advise that. Harm me, and you can do what you told me all those years ago. Yet I'll be the one laughing at your crumpled body. Bakugo dropped his hands to his side. I sighed, upset that he didn't fight back. I pulled him back onto the roof and dropped him to the floor just over the ledge. I crouched down in front of him, and he stared at me with a look of horror on his face. Why, you tried to kill me. You're a psycho. Now, Kaken. I wouldn't be like this if I wasn't nearly killed. Or would I, because of the amount of trauma bestowed on me? Then again, I probably would be because of you, my mother, my father, and even All Might. You seem shocked. Kaken didn't know that your hero said to me I needed to have a quirk to be a hero. Well, he did. So you don't need to use your quirk on me, Aizawa, as it has no effect. I looked to the side at the red glow coming from the underground hero. I turned back and saw Bakugo lunging for me. He had his hand outstretched. Dumb but left yourself open. I grabbed a hold of his arm and flipped him over me. He landed with a groan, and I walked around him. Bakugo pushed himself onto his elbows, but I placed my foot on his chest, pushing him down to the ground again. Don't get up. I took out one of my knives and twirled it around my fingers. Say back, Aizawa. I threw the knife in the general direction, hearing it collide with a wall. I heard a gasp from Bakugo and a groan from Hawks. Bakugo POV 3. He looked back at me, eyes dark but a small glint in one of them. He had contacts in, I could see that now, a dark brown with flecks of green. He had scratches and scars across his face, a long white one down one side. Snow was falling around us, getting heavier and creating a curtain that obscured our surroundings. Izuku had another knife now and was studying my face, his eyes scanning it. He grinned and slashed the knife down the side of my face. Now look at that, we have matching scars now. Why didn't you come back? His features tensed slightly at the question. We held a funeral for you. I was the only one who attended. Don't you understand what I went through? Do you think I would have just gone? Oh, I don't care that the one person I thought I could relate to died. I go to what I thought was your grave every week. I became a hero because I wanted to live what you couldn't. I felt his foot lighten on my chest, and I breathed deeply. He stepped back and sat down not far from me. I sat up and wiped my face, a trickle of BLD running down my wrist. Shouldn't let your guard down, Kaken. He stood up and walked back into the snow curtain. Something hit the back of my head. I got up and spun around. Nothing. I was hit again. I turned, seeing and hearing nothing. Again and again, I was struck from behind, each time harder than the last. I need to focus. Where will he attack next? I grunted as something sharp hit my side. I clutched the wound, BLD dripping between my fingers and staining the snow at my feet. He is only attacking me from behind, so I need to get above him. I just need to warm up. My quirk won't work. Unless I'm warm. I turned on the spot, coming face to face with Izuku. His eyes were frantic, his face contorted in an intense fury. He laughed and started attacking again, head-on this time, still moving silently so that Mr. Aizawa and Hawks couldn't tell what was happening. His fighting style changed. What is with him? Izuku chuckled and pulled out a mask from one of his pockets, holding it over his lower face while still hitting me with his knives. His expression suddenly lost all emotion, his eyes going dark. He stepped back, putting away his knife. Izuku pulled his mask on fully and pressed a small button on the side. His voice softened, reminiscent of our childhood. Shu, I don't want to draw unnecessary attention, do I, Deku? His hand went limp, a small orb falling from it and hitting the floor, sending up a purple mist. He held one finger to his lips and whispered something. Izuku, hush now, Kaken, go to sleep and let me have some fun. He toppled over, landing on his knees, body going limp. DMNU, Deku. I chuckled and crouched down in front of him, lifting his face up. Now then, let's go back in time, but let's change the roles. I saw his eyes widen before closing, slumping over. I removed my hand from beneath his chin, and he fell forward, unconscious. Now, what should I do now that you are unable to defend yourself? I took out my knife again, twirling it around my fingers, deep in thought. I won't actually hurt you, but I might as well act like it while Erase Your Head is here. I heard movement behind me and knew that Aizawa hadn't breathed in the gas. I chuckled, enjoying myself. I whistled softly, not loud but enough for Erase Your Head to hear. It was the same song I was humming earlier outside the cafe. Not much of a hint to my identity, but it could set them on the right path. The gas suddenly moved and dispersed, snowing along with it. I turned on my voice changer and looked over my shoulder at Aizawa. He stood there in shock, his composure rigid. Tsukiko. What are you doing? Shu, let me enjoy my victory. I haven't been this happy in so long. The last time it was when I finally found true family. I turned my head slightly toward Hawks, who gave me a look that warned me to be quiet. I looked back at Aizawa. His eyes were blazing red. Once again. No quirk to be erased. I turned back to Kaken and knelt beside him. Get away from him. I sighed and stood up again. HM. It's late. Huh. I stepped over Kaken and turned toward Aizawa and Hawks. Walking backward, I pressed the button on the side of my mask. Goodbye now. I stepped back and toppled off the side of the roof. I knew they would come running, so I grabbed onto a railing about 20 floors down and pulled myself onto a small ledge, waiting to see Aizawa and Hawks head toward UA, which stood in the distance on the horizon. Aizawa pooped, "Goodbye now." That voice. Hey, wait. I ran to the edge of the roof and looked down. Gone once again. That kid is going to be the death of me. The snow had ceased and was now falling slowly and softly. I gazed across the rooftops for any sign of movement, but there was none. Must have used the alleyways. I turned to see Hawks next to Bakugo. He was bleeding but not too badly. He left these, Aizawa. Hawks held up a bundle of bandages and a scrap of paper. It appears he didn't want to harm young Bakugo from the looks of this. Well, not too badly at least. And I can't say that he had no reason for this, because from what we know, young Bakugo nearly harmed him. Hawks, be professional here. Tsukiko attacked a child. He needs to get his priorities straight, or we will have to put him in jail. Not possible. He has been smart about this all. He is acting in self-defense, always allowing himself to be hit first. Young Bakugo here tormented him, so this is also classified as self-defense. And he hasn't got a quirk, so he cannot be jailed for illegal quirk usage. I sighed, knowing this was true. I was still troubled though. His voice seemed so familiar at the end. Like I know it, but then I can't recognize it. Ugh, this kid is infuriating. I walked up to Bakugo and kneeled down beside him, inspecting his wound. It wasn't deep, and it didn't seem deliberate either, unlike the gash across his face. Let's get him to the infirmary. Sure thing. Hawks propped Bakugo up against his chest and flapped his wings, so he was hovering. I can't carry you both, so I will see you back at UA. I nodded, and Hawks flew off. Something fell from his pocket as he did so, and I picked it up. It was the note Tsukiko had left behind. I read it over. It said exactly what Hawks had mentioned. Crumpling it, I was about to discard it when I saw more writing on the back. Bring All Might next time. Let's see if he can figure me out as well. From your most favorite vigilante, Tsukiko. I couldn't believe the audacity this kid had. I stayed out the rest of the night on patrol, finding villains cowering in corners after having a run-in with Tsukiko, some bound and others turning themselves in fear of being found by him. Bakugo POV. This bed is so soft and warm. I shifted my arm slightly, and a pain shot through my body. I sat up and clutched my side, wincing at the pain. Careful there. Don't move suddenly. I opened one eye and saw I was in the infirmary. The whole room was white with some potted plants. I turned and saw Recovery Girl sitting in a desk chair not far away. Her computer was turned on, but the words weren't focusing on me. I raised a hand to my head and felt a bandage across one side of my face. You have a nasty cut there, young man. Do you know what happened? I hesitated, unsure whether I could tell her what happened last night. Don't worry, I know where you went last night, and Mr. Aizawa told me what he heard, but they had nothing to tell me about what happened to you. I sighed and explained to her what happened last night and what led up to it. She looked deep in thought and kept glancing at her monitor. I explained how I had tormented him and nearly harmed him. Then I explained how he had made me think he was going to harm me. As I spoke, realization hit me about how I had treated him, but he hadn't even done what I had done to him, not even half of it. Do I deserve to be a hero after what I did to Izuku? All humans make mistakes in their lifetimes. It's a part of everyone, even the greatest heroes like All Might. If anyone tells you that you are worthless and don't deserve to be what you want to be, then you shouldn't listen. They only say it because they don't believe they can do it themselves. She turned to her computer and started typing something. I laid back on the bed, my head feeling heavy. I thought over what she said. Did I really think I couldn't do this when I bullied him? And I bullied him because of that. I sighed and lay in silence for a while, listening to the clicking of the keyboard. It was oddly soothing. After about half an hour, RG told me to get up and go, as I was all better. I did as she said and left the infirmary. I headed to the dorms since it was the weekend. It was freezing outside, and about 2 inches of snow lay on the ground, making my socks and trousers damp as I waded through it. I grumbled to myself, something bugging me, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Hey Bakugo. Wait up. I turned and saw Kirishima running up behind me, a scarf wrapped around his neck. I stopped and waited for him to catch up before continuing to walk back to the dorms. Where'd you go last night, man? You didn't come back, and when we asked Mr. Aizawa earlier, he said you were in the infirmary. Kirishima walked backwards slightly in front of me, a look of concern on his face. I sighed. Do the others want to know as well? What? Yeah, dude. They were so confused last night. I'll tell you at the dorms then. We continued walking, Kirishima rambling about some nonsense. Hey guys. We got some hot chocolate inside for you. Mina was standing by the door to the dorms with Kaminari. Kirishima and I entered gratefully and sat down on the sofa after discarding our shoes by the doorway. Most of the people from class were there, chatting amongst themselves or reading. As I leaned back, I realized that the whole room was staring at me. I groaned. So what? What happened last night, Bakugo? What's in it for me if I tell you, Ida? We will do all your chores for the rest of the week. I glanced over and saw Pink Cheeks sitting up straight on the opposite sofa, Ida giving her death glares. Now that isn't fair, Yura, deal? Wait. Shut up. Ida opened his mouth to protest, but I glared at him and he backed down. So what happened, Bakugo? Yarurosu spoke tentatively, scared I would snap at her. I sat up straight and stretched. If I tell you this, you cannot tell anyone. Got it? A chorus of yes and okays sounded before they went quiet. So, have you guys heard of the Vigilante Tsukiko? The person that has dropped the crime rate more than the heroes. Heck yeah. He is one of the best in Japan and has never been caught. I looked at Todoroki, shocked he knew this much. He shrugged and mentioned he had escaped his dad multiple times. Yeah, that one. Well, Mr. Aizawa has been after him and found some information after Tsukiko was injured. He was caught on his security camera, and he and Tsuchaki were able to find out his identity and quirk. Why'd you say identity and quirk like that? Because his identity is a boy who died over 5 years ago and has no quirk. What? That makes no sense. Geez, he must be good to not even have a quirk. Wait. How can he be a dead person if he is alive? I grinned slightly at the outburst of confusion and awe. His true identity is Izuku Midoriya, a quirkless student who went missing years ago. He was never found and was pronounced dead until now. What did you have to do with it? And why did you call him a nerd? I looked down at my hands, unsure of how to answer. I began to talk, choosing my words wisely. Izuku Midoriya went to my middle school. He was one of the top students while also being quirkless. He was bullied every day to the brink of insanity. One day, he was attacked by a group of students near the school, just around the corner in an alley. After that, he went missing. I avoided Kirishima, Kaminari, and Mina's gaze, hoping they wouldn't realize that I was a part of that group. Many people gasped at this, making comments about the school's safety. But where did you go last night? Why are you talking about a random vigilante? I looked up, amazed at how thick Ida was. Last night, Mr. Aizawa took me on patrol with him, where I met Tsukiko. Hawks went as well, however he and the hobo stayed back. Oh, you met a real vigilante. But how did you get hurt? Izuku never liked me much during middle school. So when he saw me, he wasn't happy. He grabbed me and held me over the side of the building we were on. I went silent for a few minutes, thinking over what he said to me. I was trying to get his grip off me, so I started to use my quirk. All he said to me then was, I wouldn't advise that. Harm me, and you can do what you told me all those years ago. Yet I'll be the one laughing at your crumpled body. That was what I was like back then. I had told him to jump off the building. He thought I would have laughed because of how I treated him. He pulled me back onto the roof. He didn't drop me, but he began to torment me, saying that he wouldn't be like this if he hadn't been bullied every day of his life. Then he told me that even All Might didn't believe in him. All Might did that. Once again, I looked up and saw most of the class holding down others who had jumped up in rage at this. I decided to ignore this and continued explaining. It is easy to understand why he is the best vigilante in Japan as he moved silently and quickly. He was able to get a bunch of hits on me, and I couldn't even see him at all. He had knives as well and cut my side and face. The guy threw a knife at Mr. Aizawa and Hawks as well. I think he might have drugged me or something, as the last thing I remember was a purple cloud issuing from a small orb that he dropped, and him coming up to me and talking, but I couldn't hear him. Then I blacked out. Principal Nizubi, well, young Bakugo, I was going to question you, but I have already heard the whole story, so I won't now. The whole class jumped about a foot into the air as I spoke. I had been sitting in the kitchen room having a cup of tea with Mr. Aizawa, and the class had forgotten we were there. Huh, wait, when did you get in here? Before the angry Pomeranian did, I think you will find young Bakugo. He seemed to be thinking over what I said before realizing and jumping up again. Fortunately, Mr. Aizawa came into the room and Bakugo sat down. Now children, I have come up with a plan to capture the Vigilante, and it involves all of you, All Might, and Mr. Aizawa. I heard some interested mumbling and stage-whispered comments about a rat Satan. Right then, I am assuming that you all want to join in the plan. Great. So if you would all follow the rat Satan of you, I will address you in the training room where All Might is waiting for us. I looked at Bakugo as I said this, and he avoided eye contact. I walked out with the students following behind me. It was about 7 a.m. on a Sunday, and everything felt unusually quiet. My shift didn't start until 8 a.m., so I was enjoying a rare moment of rest. I sat on the edge of my bed, my notebook open to a page filled with information on gun skills. My knives weren't very effective in well-lit areas, so I was trying to improve my skills. As I stood up and walked to my door, I unlocked it and headed to the kitchen, yawning widely. Surprise! I jumped as I opened the door, and Toga launched herself at me, causing me to stumble back. Do you not remember what day it is? She asked, tilting her head slightly. It's Sunday. I replied, confused. Toga slapped her hand to her face. It's January 17th. I looked at her, puzzled. She sighed and dragged me into the kitchen by my wrist. Happy birthday, dummy. My eyes widened as I took in the decorations, streamers everywhere and a small gift on the table. A large banner hung above the oven, proclaiming, Happy 17th birthday. Hawks and Dabi stood together, grinning at me while wearing party hats. Happy birthday, Izuku, they cheered. They walked over and hugged me, and Dabi plopped a party hat on my head. I couldn't help but smile. Today felt like one of those rare days when everything was right in the world. Here, Izuku. We got you this. Toga said, holding out a small package tied with a ribbon. I took it and carefully unwrapped it. In my palm lay a gold locket shaped like a crescent moon. Hawks leaned over and pressed the case open, revealing a small photo of all of us from when we first met, alongside a more recent one from our trip to the theme park. I felt a sting in my eyes, and a tear slipped down my cheek. Toga noticed and rushed over to hug me. Dabi patted my head, amused by my reaction. Hawks picked up the locket and placed it around my neck. Happy birthday, Izuku. He joined in the hug, and soon Dabi did too. Toga, bursting with excitement, started jumping up and down, causing us to topple over onto her. I burst into genuine laughter, not my usual maniacal one, but a true laugh of joy. Dabi snickered, and Hawks laughed along with me while Toga wriggled beneath us. I stood up and brushed myself off, then helped Toga up. She was pouting, sulking in the corner of the room. Dabi walked over and mimicked her expression, causing me and Hawks to double over in laughter again. After we calmed down, Hawks set out breakfast, waffles and fruit, and we sat down to eat. Toga perked up at the smell of the waffles and skipped to her seat. You guys are odd, but that's why I love you all, I thought as I finished my waffle. I stood up, announcing, I'm going to get ready for work. Dabi protested loudly, throwing in a few choice words. Impressive how much he can swear in a sentence, I noted. Dabi, I need to. I'm already suspicious at work, so I don't want to miss a single day. Fine. But if you aren't back by 3 p.m., I will seriously be upset, Izuku. I'll take your word for it. As I walked down the road to work, I tread carefully on the frozen ground. I was focused on my path when I accidentally bumped into someone. I lost my footing and fell to the ground, the person I collided with doing the same. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I exclaimed as I got to my feet and helped the other person up. He was a teenage boy about my age, with bright purple hair and black eyes. He stepped back, avoiding eye contact, clearly embarrassed. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Oh yes. Are you a worker here?" My dad told me to meet him here after his shift, but I arrived early and the cafe wasn't open. "Yes, I am." "Sorry, I'll open up the cafe now." I walked to the door, unlocked it, and held it open for him. Flicking on the lights, I half-blinded myself with the sudden brightness. "You can make yourself at home at one of the tables if you like while I sign in." "Okay, thanks," he replied. "I forgot to check the times and now I'm well early." I sighed and shifted my footing slightly, trying to keep moving so I wouldn't freeze. As I adjusted my scarf, something collided with my back, causing me to fall forward. I groaned slightly, the snow on the ground soaking the knees of my jeans. I turned over and sat on the floor for a second. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." A boy was sitting on the floor in front of me, his white hair blending into the snow. He hurriedly got to his feet and helped me up as well. I looked away, trying to avoid eye contact, and brushed down my clothes. "Are you okay?" I blinked and looked at him. "Oh yes. Are you a worker here?" My dad told me to meet him here after his shift at work, and I arrived early, so the cafe wasn't open. "Yes, I am." "Sorry, I will open the cafe now." He walked towards the door and opened it, holding it open for me to enter. After I was in, he closed the door and turned on the lights, the little cafe flooding with light. "I'm just going to sign myself in, so you can make yourself at home at one of the tables if you like." "Okay, thanks." He nodded to me and walked into the back room. I walked over to a small corner table, shook off my coat and scarf, and put them on the back of the chair. I sat down and pulled out my phone. No messages yet. The old caterpillar is probably asleep. I was scrolling through a random web page when the cafe worker walked up to me. His hair was pulled into a ponytail underneath a beanie, with some shorter bits falling down in front of his face. Looking closely, I could see a long white scar there. "Hello. What may I get you today?" "I'll have a coffee, please." "What strength would you like and any flavors?" "Extra strong and hazelnut flavor if that's okay." "Coming right up." He noted it down in his notebook and mumbled something to himself. "Sorry, did you say something?" "HM. Oh, sorry, I was just thinking aloud. One of my regulars takes the same order every day, and I was just wondering where he was." "Yeah, that makes sense. Dad is always talking about the coffee here, and I like the same stuff as him, really. Except for that weird obsession with vegan chocolate on tomatoes. Tomatoes of all things." The cafe worker gave a small snicker before catching himself and blushing red with embarrassment. "Sorry. I'll go get your drink." He walked off, still mumbling to himself, shaking his head slightly. I leaned back and stretched before I heard my phone buzz. I picked it up and saw a message from Dad saying he would be about 15 minutes and he was bringing Eri and Pa as well. I smiled. "Here you go." The boy was back and placed a steaming mug of coffee in front of me. "Thanks." He looked embarrassed still, and I felt bad as I had a habit of making weird faces that cause people to laugh when I'm thinking about something. Why don't you come sit with me for a while? It doesn't look like you have any more customers for the time being." He smiled at me. "Sure, I'm just going to grab my jumper." He walked out of the room again and came back soon after in a jumper that looked like it was part of the uniform, though it was old. He pulled out the chair and sat down, looking slightly awkward. "What's your name?" "My name. Right. I lost my name tag. My name is Neo." "Who?" "My name is Shinso." He seemed a bit warmer now, not so awkward. I know this might be a weird question, but how old are you?" It took him a couple of seconds to answer, as though he had forgotten. "I'm 22 today. That's why the cafe wasn't open earlier." Well, happy birthday, Neo." "What's your quirk?" My face dropped. Neo's eyes widened and he looked panicked. "Did I offend you?" "I'm sorry." I smiled slightly. "No, you didn't. I just don't really like to talk about my quirk, that's all. People don't normally like it. Can't be worse than mine." Try me." He smiled, seeing that my mood had changed. "I'm quirkless. No quirk at all." bullied and tormented for it, and I wasn't able to defend myself as no one believed the quirkless nobody over the others. His face went dark saying this, but he still smiled, acting like he was fine, though I could tell he wasn't. I wasn't sure how to answer, so we sat in silence for a few minutes. Sorry. I didn't mean to put that on you. I'm fine now really. I have a loving family and a nice job. I looked at him and he tilted his head slightly, looking at me like a cat would. Oh, right, my quirk. Well, people think that my quirk is villainous, so, like you, I was bullied for it. No quirk is villainous. A villain is defined by his or her actions. Same as with heroes. His voice went slightly quieter when he said this. What is your quirk? I can prove to you that it isn't villainous. My quirk is mind control. Neo's eyes widened, and his face brightened. That quirk is amazing. Think how good of a hero you could be. I think maybe an underground hero like Eraserhead would suit you really well. Just get the villain's attention, then make them hand themselves in. You don't even need to do hand-to-hand combat. Just use your quirk. So many heroes have quirks that need to be used in close or far range. Yours can be used in both. Oh, got it. Rambling. I grinned at him and took a sip of my coffee. Neo suddenly jumped to his feet and bowed his head. Good morning, Eraserhead, present Mike. I'm sorry I didn't hear you come in. I spun around in my chair and saw Dad and Pa standing there smiling, with Eri hiding behind Dad's legs. No need to apologize, Neo, and thank you for explaining to our son what we have been trying to tell him for years, Pa said, bowing his head to Neo. What do you mean, present Mike? Shinso is your son. Yes, and this is Eri, our daughter. They are both adopted. Shinso is 17, and Eri is 7 years old. Neo nodded in understanding and turned to Dad. What can I get you, sirs and miss? Same as normal, Neo. What would you like, Mike? Mocha, please, with pumpkin syrup. Neo nodded and noted the orders before crouching down. What would you like, Eri? Eri peeked out from behind Dad's leg and looked at Neo. Suddenly, she ran up to him and hugged him around the neck, causing him to topple over backwards. Dad and Pa rushed to Neo to make sure he was okay. I sat there in shock as Pa pried Eri off of Neo. No. No, what Eri? He was sad the other day. I saw him crying and I want to make sure he is okay and he is really nice. Pa looked at Neo in disbelief. Neo, not used to this reaction, stood up and brushed himself off. Is everything okay, Eraserhead, Mike, Shinso? Oh. Neo, Eri doesn't normally run up to people like that and doesn't usually trust people. Oh. I stood up and went to Eri, picking her up. She held me around the neck and looked at Neo, who was standing awkwardly at the side of the room. Oh, your drinks. I'm so sorry I forgot. He bowed and hurried to the back room. Izuku POV de men, don't cry. Stop thinking about Mum. She is gone. She never cared about you. I slid down the wall, putting my head on my knees. I bit my hand and tried to stop crying. There was a knock on the door. Neo, are you okay? I lifted my head and called out, yeah, sorry. The coffee grinder is broken. I'll be out in a minute. I stood up and wiped my face. Sighing slightly, I went to the coffee grinder and pretended to fix it by flipping the SW's on and off a couple of times and knocking a metal spoon against it. After that, I turned it on and made the coffee. I pulled down 2 large mugs and poured coffee into both before making up some hot chocolate for 1 mug for the mocha. After that, I grabbed a little plastic cup with the cafe's logo on it and filled it with strawberry milk. I put the cups on the tray, and, on impulse, I picked up a cookie and placed it on a plate for Eri. Sorry for the wait. Here you go. I placed down the mugs and the drink for Eri. Thanks for worrying about me, Eri. I'm fine though, don't worry. Travis. I placed the cookie in front of her, and her face lit up with a wide smile. I looked at her blankly for a moment before smiling back. The others were silent, and when I looked over at them, I saw complete shock on their faces. Are you guys okay? Oh yes. Sorry. We just aren't used to seeing Eri smile outside of the house. Oh, okay. I'm going to go do the washing up. Call me if you need anything. My voice cracked slightly, and I hurried out the back again, wiping my face. Aizawa POV, I hope he is okay. He is acting oddly, but then again he has never seen me with anyone but Hoxon here, really, and he was tackled by a kid. I looked at Shinso and saw him watching Neo. Confused, I looked over at Mike, who had a twisted smirk on his face. Are you in love, Shinso? Shinso jumped slightly and went bright red. No. I'm just wondering how he got Eri to like him so much. He even got her favorite drink, and he looked in complete shock when he first saw her. His face also went dark after Eri mentioned him crying the other day. He was right. Neo's face had suddenly dropped when Eri had said that, and it looked like he was on the verge of breaking down. I'll go check on him, then, so you can stop worrying. And also, if you do like Neo, I don't allow it. He is way too good for you, and you need to finish your studies before you date. What the hell, Dad? I don't like him. I got up and walked behind the counter. I looked through the door and saw Neo hunched in a corner of the room, his breathing heavy and rapid. I hurried inside and kneeled next to him. Neo, are you okay? He jolted upright, a petrified look on his face. Neo pushed himself closer to the wall, eyes shaking side to side, not focusing. I reached out my hand to him, and he recoiled slightly before his eyes focused on me. Don't worry, Neo. It's only me. I moved closer to him. He didn't move further away, but he still had a look of terror and distrust. He then placed his head on his knees again, tears running down his face. I just can't take it anymore. His voice was cracking, and he was trembling uncontrollably. I moved closer to him and put my arm around his shoulders. He tensed for a second, and I thought he was going to push me away, but instead he leaned against me slightly, covering his face with his hands, silently expressing his distress. Shoo, you're okay, Neo. You're safe. I promise. He sniffed and curled into a little ball. Do you want to talk? He started to shake his head before pausing. He lifted his head slightly, his eyes showing above his knees, staring straight ahead, as if unsure of what he was looking at. My mum died. That's why Eri saw me crying a few weeks ago. His voice was hoarse and weak, but he sounded like he wanted to say more. She came up to me and asked if I was okay. I got scared and ran after I saw she was with you. But as she said it today, all I could think was what if I was there? Then maybe she wouldn't have died. He looked at me, cheeks stained with tears, his hair shifting slightly to reveal scratches across his face. My eyes widened. Did she hurt you? Neo's eyes widened. No. No, she didn't. His gaze shifted again, eyes unfocusing. It's all my fault. If I was there for her. He returned to his small ball, seeming to find safety in that position. If you were there, you might have been in danger too. None of this is your fault. I promise. Izuku POV, who did you bring with you tonight, Aizawa? Hope it's someone fun, I said, sitting on the edge of the roof, looking at the stars before they arrived, hoping it wouldn't be All Might tonight. 3 people tonight. I believe you haven't met them before, Aizawa replied. I turned my head slightly to see 3 students behind him. Hello, Tsukiko. A girl with bright pink hair spoke, standing slightly in front of Aizawa. I looked her up and down. Mina Ishido, quirk, acid, class 1 AUA high school. I glanced at the others with her and grinned. Ijiro Kirishima, quirk, hardening, class 1 AUA high. Denki Kaminari, quirk, chargebolt, class 1 AUA high school. Their mouths dropped in surprise as I introduced myself. I haven't introduced myself, have I? Izuku Midoriya, quirk, none, crimes committed, also none, age, 17 as of today. I bowed slightly, keeping my head straight. Nice to meet you, Midoriya. It's your birthday? Mina asked. Yes. I replied, curious about her interest. Happy birthday. If you want it to be happy, I guess. She said. Thank you. And if you'd like to make me happy, you can tell me what rat Satan knows of me. I removed my mask, revealing a mischievous grin. Aizawa put his head in his hand, shaking it slightly. I noticed the students again. Mina was hiding behind Kirishima, had activated his quirk, and Kaminari. I pouted slightly, sticking out my bottom lip. You're no fun. I spoke in a high-pitched voice, which brought confused looks to their faces. How are you changing emotions so easily? Kaminari asked. It's easy, Kaminari. Default, watch, learn, practice. I thought you would know this, especially since you are Aizawa's students. A grumbled response that sounded like, not my problem, came from Aizawa's direction, but I didn't take my gaze off the students. Here's a game for you. Let's fight. If I win, you tell me what the rat god of you knows of me, both my self, day-to-day self, and Tsukiko. If you win, you can get me to do anything that isn't revealing my identity easily. Is that a deal? They glanced at each other, then at Aizawa, who had raised his head at my proposal. He stared at me, head tilted slightly as if in thought. You kids do what you want. But I'll set some ground rules. No killing, no removal of limbs, no serious injuries, and most importantly, never tell the other teachers I let you do this. Mina, Kaminari, and Kirishima glared at me, getting into fighting stances. Ready, guys? All ready, Kiribro, Kirishima replied. Yes, can't wait to kick his butt. Mina added. I chuckled slightly before stepping off the roof. Kirishima Poi. I rushed to the side of the roof, leaning over the edge to look at the ground. Nothing was there. What happened? Where did he go, Kirishima? Mina came up beside me, a wild look in her eyes. A muffled thud from behind made me turn around. Rule number 1 of fighting an unknown enemy: never let your guard down. Tsukiko stood there, Kaminari tied up in Mr. Aizawa's scarf. Huh. Mr. Aizawa, why did you give him your scarf? I didn't, Mina. He stole it from around my neck while I was checking the channels in case of an emergency. I carefully made my way back to the center of the roof. Interesting. He hides before he attacks. A flash of black and green beside me caused me to spin around, looking like a clumsy ballerina. Nothing was there. Mina giggled at my awkward spin. I rubbed the side of my neck, cracking it slightly. A low whistle from the side made me turn my head slowly again. Tsukiko was standing on the edge of the roof again, behind Mr. Aizawa. Aizawa, can I play a game of cat and mouse with your students? Please. His voice was sickly sweet, but the demonic grin on his face sent shivers down my spine. I don't care what you do, Tsukiko. Just don't harm them. Tsukiko thanked him and then called out to us. Come on, guys. Let's go for a little tour of my town, Pikachu dude. Stay put, will ya? Boy. You can't move anyway since you're caught. He laughed and then saluted us before jumping off the roof again. What's with this guy and jumping off roofs? What he did to Kaminari isn't cool at all. Hurry up and catch him already. If you don't, you'll all get detention for failing to catch a vigilante who hasn't had any training with heroes, whereas you have. Mina squeaked and ran to the edge of the roof. He's on a lower roof. Then he's fast. She jumped off the edge and I followed suit. Tsukiko was running across the rooftops, dodging behind water towers, climbing up taller ones, and making us chase him in circles. Multiple times, he saw a hero and shouted taunts before disappearing from sight. The heroes, thinking it was us, shouted at us, and one made a rude gesture as we ran past. Mina shouted apologies but started to lose her nerve when Tsukiko insulted the 7th hero. He ran from us for almost 3/4 of an hour. We were thoroughly tired out when he stopped for a second before jumping into an alley. I glanced at Mina and nodded slightly before taking off again after him down the alley. The alleyways had many sharp turns and dead ends. Our footsteps echoed as we ran, and loud bangs greeted us whenever Tsukiko knocked something into our path. I stumbled over the first obstacle as Tsukiko rolled a dustbin down the alley, catching me off guard. Rule 2 of fighting unknown enemies. Don't expect them to do the same thing multiple times. They are just trying to get you cornered. His voice echoed down the alley, and Mina let out a small shriek. I groaned and stood up, my trousers damp from falling into something I didn't want to think about. We ran on and heard shouts ahead and a scream. I quickened my pace and turned a corner to come face to face with Tsukiko. I opened my mouth, but he quickly covered it. Pick wisely. Over there is a young girl and boy. Surrounding them are about 6 human traffickers. The girl is quirkless, and the boy hasn't reached the age of 4 yet. They are helpless right now. I glanced over his shoulder, and so did Mina. The scene was exactly as he described. He missed the detail that one of the men had a gun and another had a knife, though. You two can either catch me or help the children. Your choice. His eyes narrowed as he said this. His face darkened, and he looked menacing, the scars illuminated strangely by the reflection of the stars on the ground. He released his hand from my mouth and stepped back silently, his shoes making no noise. I stepped towards him, and he didn't flinch at all. Mina tugged at my sleeve and pointed towards the children, nodding. My expression grave, I nodded back, and we both pushed past Tsukiko. We went a few paces up the alley before I turned around. He had vanished. Hey kids. Come to Auntie. Mina had walked up behind the villains and startled them with her loud voice. The group spun around to face her, and I motioned for the kids to follow me down a separate alleyway. The young girl picked up her brother and, walking along the wall to avoid being noticed, made her way to safety. She took a deep breath as she reached me, as if she had been holding her breath the entire time. Hey kid, do you have any family around here? Why? They were in the park, but Teddy ran off, and I followed him. Then those men started following, so I ran down here, and then you came. A loud bang made me look up. Right kid, I want you to stay close to the alley wall, walk to the end of this alley, then wait for me. I'll come get you, got it? Yes, sir. She ran off, and I hurried towards Mina. The group had formed a circle around her, closing in. I walked up behind one of them and activated my quirk. The one opposite me stopped moving and dropped the knife he was carrying. They all looked at him, and he pointed towards me. Hello, gentlemen. Now please let my friend go. I felt a breeze beside me and saw Tsukiko arrive, his mask back on and his expression dark. Rule 3. Disarm the villains first, as right now that one in the corner is aiming his gun right at your friend. I glanced over and saw Mina turn around to face the gun. She giggled slightly and tapped it, causing it to melt from the point she touched it, and the man holding it dropped it. Tsukiko had jumped in, seeing that the young students had lost track of who had what. He warned them and then walked away backwards as a scream of rage echoed from the group, and they attacked. He looked down the adjoining alley and saw a little girl looking up at him, her eyes full of wonder. Tsukiko crouched down to her level. Hello, are you with that hero? Tsukiko nodded and pulled his mask to the side. Yes, are you and your brother okay? Yes. He is over there. He didn't like the loud noise. Would you like me to calm him down? The girl's face brightened a bit as she grabbed his hand, leading him over to a small crevice in the wall. In the small gap, a young boy crouched with his knees to his chest, shaking uncontrollably. His hands were over his ears, and his face was scrunched up. I tapped his shoulder, and he opened his eyes, tears falling down his face. Kid, are you okay? He shook his head and backed away slightly, hearing more crashes. I took hold of his hand and pulled him onto my lap, holding his head to my chest. Shoo, don't worry, you will be okay. He was trembling uncontrollably and buried his face in my shirt, clinging to the fabric. I covered his ears with my hands to shield him from the noise. I rested my chin on his head and mumbled softly, trying to calm him down. It wasn't working. What is he like? I turned to his sister, who was sitting next to me, huddled in her jumper. She looked puzzled for a moment before realizing what I was asking. Music. Oscar, my brother, loves music. I sighed and thought of songs he might like. One came to mind, and I took a deep breath, closing my eyes. Time's on your side when you're 6 years young and brave hearts beating wild. It's like it's strong and could never break. Then you meet your first love just to learn a lesson. Guess it's kind of fun. Oscar ran to her and hugged her as she sniffled. Can I tell you something? Sure. You can be a hero without a quirk. I promise you that. How'd you know? Because I don't have one either. I still help people, and I've been doing it for 5 years without worrying about not having a quirk, thanks to the support of people I love. Her gaze shifted to me, and she smiled slightly. Really? Thank you, Mr. My name is Tsukiko. It was my pleasure to meet you, future hero. The girl smiled widely and put her hands on her hips, striking what I assumed was a hero pose. I smiled back and then stood up, walking out. Bye, it's Tsukiko. I waved at them and left the building, Kirishima and Mina following behind me. Time skip back, are you? Took your time. Sorry, Mr. Aizawa. We ran into some trouble and learned a few lessons. No worries, Mina. Now, did you catch Tsukiko? They both gazed at the floor and Kaminari groaned, knowing what had happened. Aizawa sighed and looked at me. What do you want to know then, Tsukiko? You know what? Why don't you ask me some questions? Your students aren't as clueless as they might seem. Mina, Kirishima, and Kaminari looked at me with a mix of offense, gratitude, and confusion. I smirked, pulled my mask to the side, and sat down on the floor. The others joined me. You can ask any question you want, but if you say anything too revealing, I will leave and come back another night. They nodded and whispered together, checking their questions with Aizawa. Are you single? I was taken aback by the question, and the students cackled. Don't worry. It isn't an actual question. Unless you want to answer. I glared at them. I am single, and I'm not sure that's appropriate to ask. Sorry, Tsukiko. I sighed slightly before laughing at the expression on Mina's face as she felt embarrassed about asking that question. Do you work during the day? I looked at Kirishima. Yes, I do. In fact, you have all met me at some point during the day. I chuckled at the shocked looks on their faces. Who is your family? My expression darkened at this question from Kaminari. My mother died in a house fire recently. My father left after finding out I was quirkless. I live with my friends, who I see more as family. Kaminari looked away, ashamed of asking that. Where do you live then? If your house was burned down. I bit my hand for a moment, wondering how best to answer. I live in an apartment block. My friend owns it. Can you give us a hint about your name? Or someone you can relate to in your civilian form? I might as well. It's not like they will be able to find me from the information I've told them. But I'll have to make them tell me what Nizu knows for this. Right, I will. But you will need to tell me the most important thing Nizu knows about me. Aizawa glared at me slightly, and his students turned towards him, unsure of what to do. It's not like you can change your identity that easily anyway. Nizu says he has a hunch on where you work. He is unsure of your name but is quite certain of where you work, however, he hasn't said where. I smiled slightly, knowing the information I was about to give would make Nizu more certain of his hunch. When the night is first born, it is new, is it not? I stood up and walked past them to the fire escape. Don't follow me. If you do, you're in trouble. Scene transition. Aizawa sat down opposite Nizu, slightly embarrassed by his sudden outburst. This kid is so frustrating. He runs away when we ask for his name, and when we ask for a hint, he gives us a riddle and then disappears. How are we supposed to figure out who he is if he keeps playing games? Please calm down, Shota. You will wake up all of the students with your shouting. Nizu's voice was weary, and he looked exhausted. You mentioned a riddle he gave you. I snapped back to attention at this question. I opened my mouth to answer, but Nizu hushed me and pulled out a small microphone. He flipped SW switch on the side and adjusted a knob before pressing a button. Rise and shine, teachers. I have a game for you, so get up and come to my office. Now. Realizing what it was, I chuckled slightly. A month prior, Nizu had set up speakers in the dorms for emergencies. One speaker was designated to announce in all dorms, including for teachers in case of an attack, but he often used it to annoy the students and staff. For example, when it was Midnight's, Mix, and Snipe's day off, he used the mic to summon them to the hall. They arrived in casual clothing for a training session I was teaching, and Nizu then announced through the mic that they were villains and needed to be captured. 10 minutes later, All Might, Midnight, and Mike entered the office, all in pajamas. Nizu chuckled as All Might wore his own merchandise, and Midnight had an eye mask tangled in her hair. What do you want, Nizu? I'm trying to get my beauty sleep, Midnight yawned, plopping down in a chair next to mine. If this is a waste of my time, I'm going back to bed this instant. No worries, Midnight. This is important, and I believe that you four can come up with the solution. We all stared at Nizu, urging him to continue. He grinned at the others and turned to me. Would you mind explaining all you know about the young vigilante Tsukiko? Erase your head. I nodded and shifted slightly, sitting up straight. For the past 5 years, I've been chasing down a vigilante called Tsukiko. For most of that time, we had no information on him whatsoever. However, we recently discovered his identity after an unfortunate incident. Almost 6 years ago, a young boy named Izuku Midoriya went missing, and as heroes, we were tasked with finding him. We were unable to locate him, and the case was closed. Years later, we found out who he is, but he is claimed to be dead by Tsukiko. Midnight leaned forward in her chair. What do you mean Tsukiko claimed Izuku Midoriya to be dead? Izuku Midoriya is Tsukiko, but he has given up that name and is using a new one now. Since discovering his BRH name, we've learned more about him in a few months than we have in years. Izuku Midoriya, age 17, as of last night, quirkless. His mother was killed in a recent house fire, and his father left when he was a child, according to what Tsukachi found out from his mother's friends. During the week I've been taking students to meet him, we've gathered small snippets of information. The first student I took was Bakugo. You mean the kid with the anger issues? Mike burst out laughing, not believing Bakugo could have gotten any information from Tsukiko because of his temper. I smiled at him and glared at the others who were whispering to each other. Bakugo was an old friend of Tsukiko, and we were able to learn about his past before his disappearance. Bakugo told us that Tsukiko was bullied and nearly killed for not having a quirk. This was the day of his disappearance. Midnight clapped her hands over her mouth, shaking her head slightly. For this reason, we took him to meet Tsukiko, as there would be a reason for him to share information. However, this didn't go as planned, as Bakugo was the one who nearly harmed him. But I raised my voice at the sudden outcry from Mike, Midnight, and All Might, while Nizu busied himself with a notebook. We found out that he had others he was living with and that he would like to meet All Might for a discussion. My face darkened as I said this, and All Might recoiled slightly. He then fled the meeting place afterward. Last night, I took another group of students, Kirishima, Kaminari, and Mina, to meet him. He made them chase him and taught them a lesson while they saved 2 young children. When they returned, he gave us permission to ask him questions. I pulled my capture weapon slightly lower on my neck so they could hear me properly. We discovered that he works a day job where we had all met him before, which was a significant hint. His second clue was a riddle. I sighed slightly before looking at Nizu, who had looked up from his notebook, resting his head on his paws. When I asked for his name, all he said was, "When the night is first born, it is new, is it not?" Before telling us not to follow him and jumping off the roof. The other teachers stared at me, mouths agape. I faced Nizu, who was smiling. "What are you so pleased about, Nizu?" Nizu turned to Mike, still smiling widely. "Well, let's go through what we know. Aizawa has met Tsukiko during the daytime. Kirishima, Kaminari, and Mina have also. This means that it is very likely they have been together when meeting him." We all stared back at him blankly. Nizu sighed. "From what I can tell, Tsukiko means child of the night, likely referring to the fact he woke up during the night he was reported missing. He was never seen again, and Izuku Midoriya was announced dead to the world, while his new persona wandered around. In his riddle, Tsukiko stated, "When the night is first born," likely referring to his name as it talks about the BRH of night, or the night as a child, hence his name, Tsukiko. Aizawa also mentioned that Tsukiko talked about it being new. He paused, looking at us as if pleading for us to understand. Why is he talking about something new? It doesn't make sense. And you rat. It's 6:34 a.m. Classes start in an hour. Mike shouted as he jumped up and rushed out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Midnight followed him, moving with more grace. All Might stood and walked toward the door. "Wait a minute, All Might. We still need you," Nizu said, gesturing for him to come to the desk. "Tsukiko has put in a request to see you. I believe it's best to agree to this, as it may provide us with more information." Sigh yes, Principal," All Might replied, bowing slightly to Nizu before leaving the room. Izuku. Later that night I hummed to myself, the same tune I had sung to the little boy and girl the night before. It calmed me, thinking about how relaxed the children were just hearing the song. I smiled slightly, almost wishing to return to my childhood, to the time before my father left. I shook my head, trying to dispel the thoughts. My father was a businessman. He always returned home with a small rose for my mother after work and would pick me up, asking how his little hero's day was. I would always answer with, great, or amazing, as it always was back then. When I started school, he would drop me off, ruffling my hair and smiling, saying how much he would miss me. My favorite memory was when I asked how long I had to go to school. When he said 16 years, I asked him to tell my mother I loved her and clung to his leg, crying because I thought I wouldn't see him for so long. After that day, he always said, "See you in a few hours, son." But everything changed when my quirk results came back. He became moody and distant, angry over the smallest mistakes. One night, he and my mother had a fight. I remember him shouting that I was a useless brat before storming out of the house. I hadn't seen him in 14 years since that day. For some reason, I never thought about how much I would like to have a father again, only believing that a father was there to love you until you did something wrong. A tapping brought me back to reality. I stopped humming and went still, recognizing two pairs of footsteps behind me. One was Aizawa's, the soft clunk of his shoes followed by silence. The other set was heavier and rougher. Oh, a new person to play with. Hello, Aizawa. Who do you have with you today? I hope we get to play. I looked over my shoulder and saw him. Izuku, hello, all might remember me. I turned to face him, my eyes gleaming with mischief. No, I don't. Are you a fan? He replied, backing up slightly, tense and unsure. Aizawa stood to the side, looking between us with confusion. Oh, I understand now. It's because I'm not the shrimpy little weed I used to be. Let me remind you. I raised my head slightly, looking down my nose at him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small bottle of water, tipping it up and pouring it over my head. The water washed away the white dye, my hair poofing up as I took it out of its ponytail. I pulled aside my mask, revealing my wide smile, and tossed it aside, where it landed a few feet from Aizawa, who picked it up. All Might's eyes widened, but I could see he still struggled to believe it was really me. Izuku Midoriya? Still don't recognize me. I sighed, removing my contact lenses. All Might's expression shifted, disbelief crossing his face. I walked toward him, hands clasped at my chest. Can even a quirkless person be a hero like you someday? A quirkless person like me? I dropped my hands and sighed. Already forgotten your line, have you, All Might? Let me remind you, no, you can't. You really need to see reality for what it is. That was it, wasn't it? I chuckled slightly, letting my arms go limp and tilting my head to the side. All Might took another step back, as if a demon had just appeared before him. Well, he had made one come, anyway. How many kids' dreams have you crushed like mine, letting them think they are useless, unwanted, hated monsters? I shouted, my voice trembling with anger. I am sorry, Midoriya. I didn't you didn't mean to. You are the symbol of peace. You are Japan's great hope. You are the #1 hero. All the rage I had kept inside for the past 6 years finally burst out. If you were really sorry, Toshinori, you would get on your knees and beg for forgiveness. I sneered at him, then glared at Aizawa, who had taken a step forward, hand on his scarf. You know Toshinori. This little weakling has gathered information on you for years. Why do you discriminate against your own kind? Oh, Aizawa and Niza didn't know this, I'm guessing. Aizawa dropped his hand to his side, a questioning look on his face. Please, don't tell him. I turned back to All Might. He had sunk to the ground, hands pressed together, resting them on his forehead in prayer. Is little Toshinori scared? Don't worry, I won't just tell Aizawa. I will tell the whole neighborhood about your secret. I walked backward, coming to a stop at the ledge. I leaned against it, wondering what All Might would do. He put his head to the roof and mumbled about me, not wanting to do this. I smiled at him, then at Aizawa. I stepped up onto the ledge, stretching my lungs as far as they could go before shouting at the top of my voice. Hello, Japan. If you're awake, get out your phones, cameras, or whatever you need and record this. Lights flickered on. I am Tsukiko, better known as the infamous vigilante who does better than most heroes at keeping your city safe. More lights came on, and people began to come out into the street. I am here to tell you information about your favorite hero All Might. But first, let me tell you who I really am. I am Izuku Midoriya, age 17, and I was announced dead nearly 6 years ago by the police. Shrieks of uproar echoed down the street, and lights further away turned on. All Might is a fraud. The uproar got louder, and little flashes came from below, showing me people were recording. All Might was never as mighty as he seems. In fact, I don't even think he should be the symbol of peace anymore. The crowd grew more restless, and I smiled, shifting my hair away from my mouth. This man, I pointed behind me to All Might, while also motioning for Aizawa to move away, is a liar to you all. 6 years ago, I met him. I told him I was quirkless. I asked if I could still be a hero. He told me to get a grip on reality. This wannabe hero crushed my dreams. He probably has done it since then and before as well. The drone hovered a few feet in front of me now, and I smiled at it. That isn't even the worst part. Toshinori isn't superior to us quirkless at all. All Might was born quirkless. He was given a quirk. And yet he has the nerve to discriminate against those he used to be like. How messed up is that? A chorus of boos came from below. I didn't know who they were for, but I didn't care, as long as the world knew this. I walked towards All Might, who had stood up now, backing away slowly. Please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean any of it. If you want forgiveness, get on your knees and beg for it. Or are you too scared of owning up to the mess you made of innocent people's lives? What is it, Toshinori? He looked at me. Get on your knees, Toshinori. Beg for forgiveness. Don't expect it to be served to you on a silver platter, Mr. High and Mighty. He dropped to his knees, arms limp at his sides. You see, Japan. He doesn't deny it. What do you think of your #1 hero now? I walked back to the edge and saw police cars arriving at the scene, more people in the streets than ever. TV vans had turned up as well, cameras trained on me, reporters pushing through the crowd to try and get to the building. I smiled and reached into my pocket, pulling out a spare mask and stretching it over my face. I then pulled out a small ball and dropped it, a screen of mist erupting around me. Clear the way. Clear the way. I pushed towards the front of the crowd, my cameraman trailing behind me. Move, people. I'm on air in 2 minutes. This made people move, and the chatter turned more to interest, with a hint of anger in it. I stepped on someone's foot and hurriedly apologized. It was a man wearing a hoodie with jet black hair, a mask covering the bottom part of his face, a young girl next to him. Move it. I want to see All Might in all his glory. Excuse me, but I need to get through to the front. I pushed past him, and I swear I heard the girl say that my BLD would taste yummy. I shook my head slightly and began pushing past people again, shouting at the top of my voice. After struggling through the crowd, I came to a clearing at the front of the building and turned to my cameraman. We are on air in 3. I straightened my blazer and fixed my hair before taking a breath. Hello. I am here on street. We have had frantic reports and have come to investigate. I walked over to a man, holding his phone out, facing it to the roof. Sorry, sir, but are you able to tell me what you know? He turned to face me, anger and shock evident on his face. You didn't hear him. Sorry, sir, but could you minimize the swearing? We are on air. Yes, sorry. Well, that kid who went missing 5 years ago, Izuku Midoriya, he is alive. He's that vigilante kid, Tsukiko. He mentioned some strange things about All Might. Some guy had a drone on him and was able to fly it up onto the roof and record the whole thing. Apparently, All Might is discriminating against quirkless kids. None of us believed him, but we didn't hear any reply from All Might denying it. I stood in shock for a moment before regaining my composure. Do you know where the person with the drone went? Nah, the drone is still up there though. I think they are going to post the video or something like that so we can see if it was all real for ourselves. I don't know if I want to believe it or not. He turned and walked away, shoulders hunched slightly. Well, that's all folks. Haley is saying goodbye. Tsukachi POV, what is happening? Someone put on the news now. I yelled, and one of the officers rushed to his computer and found channel we all watched in silence. What is he talking about? This isn't true, is it, Chief? Tsuragami sighed and shrugged. I'm not sure. We will have to investigate this with All Might. We also need that tape from the drone to analyze. Reports will be here tomorrow asking how Midoriya is alive and why he said that about All Might. We need concrete evidence ASAP. Tsuragami turned to me. Will we be able to talk to All Might? See if what they are saying is true. Yes, sir. I will also talk to Eraserhead as he has been chasing Tsukiko on Nizu's orders, and he may have more information. Very well. I will await your report on what has been going on. With that, he turned and left, the door swinging shut behind him. Time skipped to 9 am. Come on, All Might. You were supposed to be here half an hour ago. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, hand over my face. Obviously, no sleep for over a day isn't good if you are trying to stop riots. I sighed, running over what little information I had found from reports. Every single report covered the same conversation. Izuku Midoriya was found to be alive and mentioned some strange things about All Might. The door creaked open, and I uncovered one eye, looking through my fingers. Shota stood in the doorway, his quirk activated and a capture weapon around All Might, who was sitting on the floor just behind him. I sat up straight. Sorry he is late. Someone, Shota glared at Toshinori, decided to barricade his door shut, although only a few people know where he lives. I groaned slightly and stood up, offering Shota a chair as he deactivated his quirk and released Toshinori from his capture weapon. Toshinori groaned and stood up, grumbling. Toshinori, you know of my quirk, but I don't wish to use it on you, so please answer my questions truthfully. You can refuse to answer if you like, but it will make my job a lot harder. Toshinori nodded and leaned against the desk. Just ask anything you want. I will answer it all. I nodded and grabbed my notebook and pen, opening to a clear page. Straight into it. Have you met Izuku Midoriya before? Yes, I have. Truth, what was the interaction you had with Izuku Midoriya? He was a fan, and I saved him from a villain. Truth, anything else? No. Lie, I scribbled in my notebook. Are you sure, All Might? There is more. Sigh, pray tell. Izuku Midoriya was a fanboy. He ran into a villain and I saved him. Afterward, he asked if he could be a hero as well. Without a quirk. Truth, after he asked this, I told him he couldn't. To get a grip on reality. Truth, I wrote this down in my notebook, frowning slightly. One of the passers-by said that Izuku thought you had done it to other quirkless kids. I did. I'm not proud of it. After he went missing, I realized my mistake. Truth, they also said that you were born quirkless, is that true? Yes, it is. I was given my quirk. True, who was it given to you by? Him. The door banged open, a low-ranking officer standing there out of breath. Eraserhead. There is an emergency at UA. I jumped up. What do you mean? Aren't there any others who can help? There have been multiple attacks across the city. All our spare heroes can't handle this. Can't handle what? The UA dorms are on fire. My eyes widened in horror. Fire. Oh no. Oh no. I'm sorry, but I shook my head and rushed out of the police station. UA was almost 15 minutes away by car, nearly 45 by walking. Fastest way to get there. Rooftops. I unraveled my capture weapon and threw it around a lamppost, tightening it before jumping, pulling it tight and flying above the rooftops. Landing, I stumbled slightly, my ankle rolling sideways. I winced but started running again as fast as I could. An orange haze was on the horizon, and I hoped against hope that it was just the sun. People below gasped and pointed at me as I ran by, in awe of seeing an underground hero and a UA teacher during the day. Many cheered and took pictures, but I ignored them. I had to get to UA. Why today of all days? It's my class's day off. Please say they are okay. Please say my class is okay. I spotted other heroes, but they were all heading in opposite directions. The attackers had planned this thoroughly. All the heroes I had seen in this area were those with quirks that didn't work well against fire. All those with water quirks must be on the other side of the city, with no time for them to get here, and even if they could, there were more attacks happening elsewhere. The orange light is growing bigger. Please say it isn't the dorms. Please. I jumped over a gap between rooftops, landing unsteadily. I groaned in agony but ignored it, the adrenaline driving me. I made it to the hill and hurried up it, hobbling slightly at steep parts but keeping a steady pace. Reaching the top of the hill, I knew it wasn't the sun casting that light. Part of the wall had been knocked down, and a large smoke cloud was emanating from the east side of campus. A large group was standing nearby, a few sitting on the ground, others rushing around. I saw a recovery girl and ran up to her. "Where's Hisashi? Is he okay?" She looked up at me, relief washing over her. "He is okay, Hisashi is over by the tent." I thanked her and ran to the makeshift medical tent. He was sitting outside it, coughing slightly but looking otherwise unharmed. "Hisashi." I ran up to him and hugged him tightly. "Hi Shota. Cough, glad you're okay. What happened? Where's the fire?" "Toga. She got into UA grounds and turned off all security. The villains managed to get in and set fire to the teachers' and 3 students' dorms. Cough, everyone is out, though." I let him go and stood up, looking around. "Hisashi. Where are Eri and Shinso?" He stood up and looked around too. "I thought they followed me out. Are they not here?" "Shinso." He started shouting for them, his voice shaking. "Shota. I think they are still in the teacher's dorm." I ran ahead, pushing through the crowd to get to the teacher's dorms. People shouted and called after me, telling me to stop. "Shota. Mr. Aizawa. Don't go in there. It's too dangerous. My kids are in there, and if you think I'm going to stand back and watch, then you have another thing coming." A hand grabbed me from behind, and I spun around. A young man with white hair stood there, with hazel eyes and a costume. "You stay here, Aizawa. I will get them. Don't worry." "And Neo." He grinned at me and pushed me to the floor before running past me towards the dorm, disappearing into the flames. I went to stand but collapsed again, my ankle buckling. "Shota. Who was that? Are you okay?" Hisashi ran up to me, coughing slightly. "I'm fine. Sneo. The kid from the cafe. He is Tsukiko. And he just ran into the fire to get our kids." I tried to stand again, but Hisashi held me by my shoulder, making me stay on the ground. "Shota. You stay here. You won't be able to help them with your ankle like that. I'll go help him." As he said that, the roof of the teacher's dorm caved in. "Izuku v. Neo." I half smiled at him. I looked at him and saw him wincing slightly. His balance was off, and on closer inspection, I saw his ankle had swollen badly. I smiled fully and then pushed him to the floor. He stared up at me in shock before I ran past him. There was a large crowd around the teacher's dorm, and I pushed through it. Ochako and Tsuyu were at the front, trying to get water up to the top of the building. "Put water around the bottom supports of the building and work your way upwards." They jumped and turned to me, confused. "Do it, or the building will cave in from all sides." They nodded and relayed orders to the others. Kirishima, Kaken, Kaminari, and Mina came to the front. "DMN Deku. What are you doing here?" "Help them put out the fire." Kaken stared at me in shock for a second before snapping to attention. He opened his mouth to speak, but I ran off again, darting into the burning building. Shouts echoed after me as I ran past a wall of flames, blocking the outside from my view. I coughed slightly and pulled out my mask, covering the lower portion of my face. "Where are they? Where are they? If you can hear me, keep talking and I will reply." A muffled shout came from the other side of the dorms. I ran to the first room and kicked down the door, singeing the side of my trousers. A wall of fire greeted me, the intensity of the heat nearly unbearable. I stepped back and ran to the next room. "I'm coming, don't worry. Are you in a safe place?" "No. There's fire on the side of the walls." The ceiling a few floors above began to creak, and debris fell, clouds of dust joining the smoke. "They haven't gotten to this side of the building. Keep talking to me. Are either of you hurt?" A piece of burning debris hit my arm, and I winced. I clutched at my arm and looked into the next room. It was empty. A rasping cough came from the next room over. Hey kid. You're okay, don't worry. The ceiling creaked again, clouds of ash falling over me. The next door was fully engulfed in flames. I took out a knife and hacked at the door, covering my eyes as it collapsed. Kid, are you okay? More coughing and a strained answer came. The ceiling creaked again, louder, and a small cry of fear came from the far corner. Shinso and Eri were huddled together beside a desk, the walls opposite. Them blackened and ablaze. I tore off my mask and rushed towards them. Put this on now. I have one for Eri as well. I pulled out my spare mask and placed it over Eri's face. She looked at me, eyes teary and wide. The ceiling creaked again, and she buried her head in Shinso's shoulder. Come on. Quickly. Are you both able to walk? Why yes. I pulled Shinso to his feet, Eri in his arms. The ceiling creaked, and debris fell around us. Go. Hurry. I pushed Shinso in front of me, guiding them to the door. The hallway was full of smoke. Keep to the center, crouch down low so you avoid, the ceiling cracked. I lunged forward and tugged Shinso and Eri to the ground, covering them with my body. Eri screamed, and I hissed as burning debris fell on my back. I put my hands over my head, protecting it. I felt the debris hit my hands and upper back, my skin burning on impact. It stopped for a moment, and the ceiling creaked slightly. I uncovered my head and looked up. A large crack was spreading above us, dust falling. Brace yourselves. The ceiling caved in. My ears rang and my head felt heavy. I pushed myself up, pieces of ceiling and burning wood falling off me. My back didn't hurt anymore. Not a good sign. I groaned and sat up. My hand lay limply at my side. I couldn't move my fingers. I looked down and saw Shinso's head was bleeding slightly, luckily just a small scratch. I shook my head slightly, trying to clear it. I reached up with my uninjured hand, putting it on the side of my face. It hurt to touch my ear, and when I drew my hand away, it was covered in blood. A crackling noise brought me back to my senses with a sharp jolt. I need to get them out of here. I shook Shinso, trying to rouse him, but to no avail. I stood and pulled him onto my back before shaking Eri, her eyes flickering open as she coughed. Eri, stay right in front of me. I need you to tell me where the nearest entrance is. I coughed slightly, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth. Eri nodded and looked around after quickly standing up. The nearest door is that way. It takes us out the side. I nodded and groaned, my whole body feeling weak. I needed to get them out quickly before I passed out. I grabbed Eri's hand and pulled her towards the doorway. Most of the ceiling had caved in, and rubble was strewn everywhere. The smoke was getting thicker and I choked. We were close to the doorway, and I could hear muffled shouting, though it wasn't clear as my hearing felt off. Eri shouted out, and I saw figures moving near the exit, trying to shift the rubble. I stumbled and fell, Shinso rolling off my back onto the floor beside me. Get up, Izuku. Be a hero for Eri and Shinso. Come on. Get up. I pushed myself up slightly, Eri tugging at me, trying to help me up. She was crying, and I could hear the roof cracking again, rubble falling all around us. Eri, get Aizawa. Quickly. Get medical attention for Shinso. I'll be okay. I promise. I crumpled to the ground, my head swimming and my vision blurry. Eri was screaming now, pulling at my arm, calling out for help. I felt Shinso stir beside me, his weight shifting the rubble around us. The heat was too intense. I couldn't focus anymore. Shinso was pulling at me now, lifting me off the ground. He was shouting something but I couldn't make it out. Please. Just let me sleep. Don't wake me up. I opened one eye slightly. I was in a white room. The sterile white of the hospital room was blinding. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound that filled my ears. My right side was met with a silence that was both unfamiliar and terrifying. Midoriya, can you hear me? Shinso's voice came through, muffled, as if he was speaking through layers of cotton. I turned my head slightly, wincing at the sharp pain that shot through my hand and up my arm. It was then I noticed the casts, the bandages, and the concerned faces of Shinso, Eri, and Kaken hovering over me. What happened? My voice sounded hoarse, foreign to my own ears. Kaken's usual scowl deepened, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite place. You don't remember, Deku. You ran into a burning building, saving these two. You're lucky to be alive. Eri clutched a small plush toy to her chest, her eyes wide and shimmering with unshed tears. Mr. Neo. You saved me, but you're back. And your hand. I tried to move, to reassure her with a touch, but my left hand was encased in plaster, and the mere thought of shifting sent a wave of agony across my back. The reality of my injuries began to sink in, a broken hand and third-degree burns. It's okay, Eri, I managed to say, though the effort to speak was immense. I put my right hand over my eyes, rubbing them. The door clicked open, and I uncovered my eyes, turning my head slightly to see Recovery Girl. Hello, dear. Are you feeling better? Her voice was slightly muffled, and I turned my head more, pain shooting across my upper back. I winced, and Recovery Girl tooted. Tisi, don't move too much, dear. It won't help your recovery. Do you know what happened to him then? I looked at Shinso. His mouth was moving, but his voice was also muffled, almost half the normal volume. Yes, but no one overreact. It won't be good for anyone. They all nodded and stayed quiet, listening to Recovery Girl as she spoke about some medications. I listened as well as I could, but I found it hard to focus on what she was saying. I pushed myself up using my uninjured hand. Kaken watched me as I did this, still frowning slightly, but his expression was more worried than angry. Be careful, please, Midoriya. I need to tell you something, so please pay attention as much as possible. I turned to Recovery Girl, confused about why she said, as much as possible. She sighed slightly before walking up to my bedside. I'm sorry to say, Midoriya, but you have lost most of your hearing in your right ear. It can't be repaired. I looked at her blankly, not registering what she had just said. What do you mean? Recovery Girl sighed and looked at Shinso, who was sitting closest to me. If you're okay with this, Midoriya, I'm going to get Shinso to tap on the side of your face to help you better understand. I nodded and told her it was okay. Shinso leaned over me and tapped the left side of my face, just under my ear. He then tapped the right side of my face just under my ear. It felt normal, but I didn't hear anything like I did on my other ear. I reached up and clicked next to my ear. Nothing. I'm part deaf. I can still hear, but not fully. I think that when the rubble and burning wood fell onto you, your head was hit, causing you to lose consciousness for a minute or two, during which more rubble landed on you. I looked at Recovery Girl. Thank you for helping me. I moved myself to the side of the bed, putting my feet on the floor. Deku, where are you going? I need to get home. But you're hurt, Mr. Neo. Why are you calling him that, kid? Eri turned to look at Kaken, a puzzled look on her face. Is he not the worker at the little cafe? Kaken's eyes widened, and his gaze shifted from Eri to me. Surprise, I guess. I pushed myself into a standing position, my back screaming in pain, but I ignored it. I had to get home. I needed to tell Tuya and Toga that I was okay. I had just run off without telling them. I had just reached the door when it swung open, making me jump. Hawk stood there, breathless and panicked. When he saw me, he pulled me into a hug, holding me tightly. I winced slightly as I felt the skin on my back stretch. Don't you ever do that again. I looked up at him and saw he was crying. I hugged him back, whispering, we can't hug here. We can't have the heroes finding out you have been harboring a missing and wanted person. I don't really care, Izu. He stretched out his wings, shielding us from the view of the others in the room. I told Tuya and Toga, he whispered, they know what happened, where you are, your condition, etc. They know that you will most likely be stuck here for a while as well. He had spoken into my non-deaf ear, and I felt a small wave of relief, knowing that at least one ear worked properly. But won't they find out that you have been harboring me? I will explain to them. If they force you to tell who else you live with, lie, or make them agree to your terms. I nodded and leaned my head on his shoulder, a tear falling from my eyes. I knew that by revealing myself and coming here, I would get into trouble, but I didn't think about this being the consequence. Hawks patted the back of my head and let his wings retract. I shut my eyes. I felt safe here. I didn't want it to change. Hawks, would you mind letting my patient go? He still needs treatment. I felt Hawks release me and I opened my eyes, looking up at him. He smiled at me, then led me back to my bed, pushing me down onto it before seating himself on the desk. Recovery Girl gazed at Hawks for a second before turning her attention back to me. You will be staying here for now. Nizu wishes to talk to you, but right now, you still need to heal. With that, she kissed my uninjured hand and told me to lay back on my bed. I did as she said and instantly felt tired, like the wind had just blown it in through the window. Hawks was still smiling at me and I looked at the others. Eri had climbed onto the bed and was sitting at the end of it, watching me closely. I smiled at her before falling asleep. Time skip brought to you by Izuku sleeping for almost 2 full days because of a lack of sleep and healing wounds. I took a set of clothes from Recovery Girl, thanking her before she left the room. I sighed and spread out the clothing on the bed. It was a white tank top and black jeans. I took off my medical shirt and pulled on the tank top. It was slightly too small, so the bandages on my back showed through. I pulled at the neckline, trying to loosen it, but gave up quickly. The fabric was stretchy but wouldn't stretch further than a few centimeters from my body. I sighed and then pulled on the jeans. Luckily, they fit properly. I picked up my medical clothes and dumped them in a basket that Recovery Girl said to use. I smiled slightly to myself. I then pulled on some socks and a pair of sliders that were by the door. Recovery Girl stood outside waiting for me. She looked up at me and smiled. I'll be taking you to Principal Nizu's office now, dearie. Just a warning for you, the UA students are in class right now but may exit at any time. If you feel stressed at all, please say and I will make them quiet. I nodded and pulled my hair back before realizing I didn't have a hair tie, so I just let it fall loose. Recovery Girl turned and trotted off. I trailed behind her, trying to get a bearing of my surroundings. I could tell we were on the ground floor and the classes were not in session because of the loud noise behind a door we were heading to. I stopped for a second, touching my ear, still not used to the lopsided hearing. Recovery Girl stopped at the door and looked over her shoulder. Are you coming, Izuku? Oh, yes, no. Sorry. No need to be sorry, dearie. She chuckled slightly as I caught up to her, opening the door and stepping out. The hall we entered was massive. 2 large doors led to a dining hall opposite a floor-to-ceiling window across the entire wall. There was a large staircase at the side of the room, painted white with glass steps leading to the top of the building. The walls were decorated with pictures of heroes that had graduated from UA, celebrating their lives and achievements. I looked and saw that no one was standing near the All Might one. I smiled slightly. Hey, Izuku. I turned and saw Shinso running over to me, a small group behind him. Hi, Shinso. Glad to see you are okay now. Eri has been worried about you. He smiled widely and began to tell me what happened while I was asleep. Get out of the way, Deku. Hello to you as well, Kaken. And if you're too blind to see, there is a lot of room for you to walk past. Unless your ego doesn't fit, of course. I turned my head slightly and raised an eyebrow, silently daring him to retaliate. Did the heroes finally catch you then, Tsukiko? Kirishima had come up behind Kaken and flicked the back of his neck. The hell, tie hair. Kirishima rolled his eyes. Anyways, if you need anything while you're here, come find me, and I'll help you. With that he walked off to the dining hall, pulling Kaken along behind him. I saw Recovery Girl waiting by the stairs at that moment and turned to Shinso. Sorry, I have to go. Rat Satan wants a word about something. Tell Eri I'm okay, will you? I ran off, stopping just in front of Recovery Girl. She nodded and then continued up the stairs. The landing that Nizu's office was on was larger than expected for such a small chimera. It also had a strange smell. Hawks was standing outside the door to Nizu's office, doing something on his phone. He was blushing slightly. Talking to your boyfriend, are you? He jumped and dropped his phone. It slid to my feet and I picked it up. I flicked through the messages and then threw Kiego his phone back. You are. Interesting. I'm going to tell this to T. I cut myself off hurriedly and then burst into laughter. Kiego's face had gone beet red, and he was avoiding eye contact. FCKU Izuku. No thanks. And also mind your language, you are a hero. I glared at him, and he shifted his wing to cover his face. I chuckled and walked up to him. I tapped his wing, and he let it flop for a second, glared at me, then put it back up. I shook my head slightly. Principal Nizu is ready for you, dearie. Recovery girl popped her head out of the door, smiling. If you like, young Hawks can come in as well. Yes, please. Come on, Kiego. Kiego dropped his wing, face less red now. We walked into Nizu's office. The first thing hitting me was that one part of the room smelled nice, the other part not so much. I sighed and then looked into the corner. Aizawa was sitting there, head dropping slightly forward. He is asleep. What can I do with him now? Take his capture weapon. Nah, too obvious. How about? I stepped closer to him and Aizawa opened one eye. Don't think about doing anything, kid. Hawks jumped slightly, not realizing Aizawa was awake. I chuckled, amused by the proceedings. Nizu cleared his little rat throat. Young Hawks, Midoriya, please take a seat. I plopped myself down on a chair and crossed my legs, letting my sliders fall onto the floor. Kiego sat beside me, sitting all prim and proper. Right then, I'm going to ask you some questions, Midoriya. You can agree to answer them or not. However, before we start, I would like to make a deal. I perked up slightly, interested in what Nizu was going to say. He chuckled slightly, seeing me snap to attention before opening a notepad. So, Midoriya, I would like to enroll you at UA High School. Huh? What? Why? Seriously? Nizu held up his hand, asking for silence. I shut up immediately. As I said, I would like for you to join UA. I have already spoken to the Hero Committee, and they have agreed. There are, however, conditions. You will need to be adopted by a hero, mustn't leave the ground without permission, and give up personal details about your vigilante life. If you don't accept, you will face serious consequences. I chuckled slightly. You can't send me to jail, I haven't committed any crimes. I have never killed, trespassed, harmed for no reason, or stolen. If anyone should be arrested, it is All Might. Plus, I am the best at dealing with villains. Nizu smiled. I know that, Midoriya. However, the police are doubtful. I looked at Kiego, who was shuffling his feet. I scowled slightly. I will agree to joining UA, but only on certain conditions of my own, then I will accept yours. A small snore came from the corner, indicating Aizawa had fallen asleep, but I ignored it and stared at Nizu. What are they then, Midoriya? First, Hawks will not get into any trouble at all. Second, my family will be provided for and protected, meaning no one can touch them. Third, I can see my family once a week. Fourth, I'm adopted by Aizawa as I like him the best, sorry K. Fifth, I don't want special treatment from teachers, and I am called Neo in class and on school grounds unless I give permission to teachers and students. Kigo smiled at me and then glanced at Aizawa, who had stopped snoring. That all seems in order, so yes, I approve of it. I will ensure that the Hero Commission knows of these terms as well as the teachers. Now, may I ask some questions? A strange noise came from Aizawa, and I turned to look at him. Sorry Nizu, but I will need to talk to Mike about this. I understand. You may go now if you like. Aizawa nodded and stood, leaving the room. I turned back to Nizu. So, may I call you Midoriya as it is more formal for the time being? Yes, sir. You may call me Midoriya whenever. Right. Okay, Midoriya, may I know your personal details, like full name, age, etc.? Name, Izuku Midoriya, preferred Neo. Age, 17, January 17th. Occupation, cafe worker/vigilante. Okay. Now, may I know who your family is, so we can fulfill your requirements? Yes. Kigo is my second eldest adopted sibling. My sister is Himiko Toga. My eldest sibling is Tuya Todoroki, also known as Dabi. And if I hear that the police are after them, I will be leaving UA and spilling your secrets all over the streets, Nizu. Kigo chuckled slightly and put his head in his hand. Nizu looked slightly shocked but then smiled. Of course. Now, if there are any other requests, please say now. I will fix a dorm for you as soon as possible, by the way. I reached up and tapped my ear slightly. Would I be able to get something to improve my hearing? I don't feel safe in my current state. Nisa's face dropped slightly for a second before brightening again. Yes, we should be able to arrange something. I believe that Yaoyorozu will be able to set up something for the time being while I get some of the support course to help make a more efficient one. Thank you, Nizu. Am I allowed to get my belongings from my home? I need to grab my... I cut myself off, remembering that my costume hadn't been returned yet. No need to worry, Aizu. I took it back to Toga so she could fix it as you might have had a building collapse on you. I smiled at Hawks. Thanks. So may I leave, Nizu? Yes, you may. I will have Aizawa wait for you at the entrance when you return so he can show you your dorm. Also, would you prefer to be in the same area as Aizawa or with the students? May I stay with the students, sir? But when Aizawa and his family return to his home, may I go with them? Yes, you may. I shall get that sorted for you. Hawks, please stay with him. Yes, sir. Skip to when they are outside UA gates. Are you sure you're okay with me going to UK? I walked beside him, dodging through the crowds of shoppers. Kei tucked his wings in tight so as not to bump into people. Yeah, I'm okay with it. Just be warned that Himiko might strangle you for not telling her. He put his hands in his pockets and ruffled his wings slightly. That reminds me. I need to tell Himiko what you were saying to Tuya. Neo. The shoppers turned to us, and some rushed forward begging Kei for autographs. I stepped back slightly, not wanting to be seen. Hawks, is that your boyfriend? I jumped hearing that and went red. No. He's my brother. Well, adopted brother. I'm not dating him. You have an adopted brother. He is a close friend, so we call each other brothers. I'm sorry, but I must be going now. Wait, are you coming from UA? Yes, my friend is starting the hero course there. Now we must be going. Kei passed through the crowd and walked up to me. He shouted, "Run for it." And we sprinted off away from the crowd. About halfway down the street, Kei opened his wings and flew up, grabbing onto my hand as I held it out for him. He shot up into the air, gliding above the rooftops. It was nice up here. The breeze was cool but not freezing, and the sun was out for the first time in a while. I smiled and tapped Kei's wrist, asking him to drop me on the roof. He let go, and I landed on the roof, landing slightly less gracefully than normal. I looked up and saw Kei hovering above me. I grinned at him and counted down from 3 on my fingers. On 1, I set off running, Kei flying at the same pace as me, slightly ahead. I picked up my pace and so did Kei. I looked towards the street and saw people filming us, and smiled and waved before looking up at Kei. I motioned to him that we had an audience, and he turned and waved to them as well. I felt alive. Hawks swooped down and grabbed my arm, swinging me up into the air. The world looked so different upside down. I laughed and stuck out my hand for Kei. He grabbed it and flew us out of the passers-by's eye line. He then let go of my hand about 3 feet from the ground. I looked up and saw Toga and Tuya barreling towards me. I straightened up then fell backwards, Toga clinging onto me tightly. Aizu. You're okay. He's okay. Toga shouted so loud that I feared half the street would hear, so I covered her mouth. Himiko. Hush a bit. If you do, I'll tell you what I saw on Kei's phone. She shut up instantly. I snickered slightly and whispered what it was in her ear. Her face was a mixture of surprise, disgust, and laughter. Hey, did Aizu see? And did he just? Kei walked up to Tuya and rested his forehead on his shoulder in disappointment. Yes, he did. I was hoping he would forget. Kei groaned, and Tuya patted his head before turning to me. Glad you're back from UA Kit. I'm surprised you even stayed there that long. I hope you didn't see old man or that other guy. Himiko. I need to tell you something. I stood there awkwardly and Kei lifted his head. We will talk inside, kid, okay? I smiled at Tuya, glad he was taking care of the situation. Skip to when Izuku told them everything. I looked at my hands, fiddling with the bandages on my hand. Tuya and Himiko had been quiet for too long. I was scared I had disappointed them. Or that they now hated me. Guys, I don't have to go if you don't want me to. But it means I will be on the run forever. Aizu. It isn't that. I want you to be happy, so I am fine with you going. I looked up at Toga and smiled slightly. I then looked at Tuya. I expected his face to be dark as thunder, but instead he was grinning. Ear to ear. I sat up straight, confused. You aren't mad, Tuya? Why would I be mad? You can beat up my old man. And you can tell me how my family is. I am so proud of you, kid. He stood up and came over to me. And I'm telling you this, we will visit every weekend, text you every day, and if you get even a bad look, I am coming to school and I will. Don't threaten the students, Tuya. Izuku has put you under protection, so don't give them a reason to break their deal. I hugged Tuya, surprising him slightly. He hugged me back the group hug. Toga jumped onto the sofa and grabbed me and Tuya, squeezing us hard before barking at Kei to come over to us. He did. I smiled. I was with my family and my dream had come true. Next day, Neo. Hurry up, you need to get to school. You are normally up by now, and I know that as you work at my favorite cafe. I groaned and sat up. I had spent the night on the sofa of Aizawa's house as Nizu hadn't been able to move me into the dorm the night before due to the teachers' dorms being rebuilt. It was strange being here as I knew that Aizawa had a house, but I never thought I would be living there as well. I stood up and stretched. Good morning, Mr. Neo. Morning, Eri. And you don't have to call me Mr., you know. I am now your adopted brother. Oh yeah, I have another brother. She ran up to me and knelt down, hugging me. Dad, put your uniform over there, brother. He also said that there is a present for you. I thanked her and stood up. She grabbed onto my hand and guided me to the kitchen. Glad you're up, Neo. Eat your breakfast quickly, then get dressed. You don't need to call me Neo in private if you don't want to. Just around pupils. I don't care about the teachers and heroes knowing who I am. He nodded and took a sip of coffee. Diamond, Hizashi, wake up. I sat at the table and pulled a plate of toast towards me. I nibbled at the corner of my toast and opened my phone. I was greeted with about 50 messages from Himiko, Tuya, Kigo, and Shinso. Hey Eri, where's Shinso? He is staying at the dorms. He wasn't sure if people wanted to know that he was now adopted by Aizawa and didn't want to act suspicious. She took a bit of toast from my plate, stuffed it in her mouth before running to Hizashi and hugging him around the middle. I smiled and ate the rest of my toast. I scrolled through my messages and told Himiko that I would text her when I arrived at UA. I pulled out the chain from my neck and opened the locket, rubbing the glass over the picture before putting it back. I stood up and put my plate in the sink. I greeted Hizashi good morning before picking up my uniform and going to the bathroom to change. 15 minutes later, I was waiting by the door for Aizawa, Hizashi, and Eri. My uniform was plain, a gray blazer, red tie, white shirt, and green trousers. I slung an old rucksack over my shoulder and packed my notebook, pencil case, and costume. I thought I would play a prank on my class, pretending that a vigilante had broken into the school grounds, as I heard Aizawa mention training today with his class. Nizu had given me my timetable the night before, showing that I was in class 1A and I would receive my books today. I was also told that Aizawa had a habit of doing random training sessions along with the scheduled ones. I smiled slightly. For nearly 12 hours I had been in Aizawa, yet I kept forgetting. Right, Izuku, let's get going. Sorry for the wait. No worries, Aizawa. Raise your head. I stumbled over my words, feeling slightly embarrassed. Call me what you want. I don't really care. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. I nodded and readjusted my rucksack. Eri ran up to me, wearing a little red dress. Do I look pretty? Very pretty, Eri. You look appealing, my child. It was unusual hearing Aizawa be so kind to people. I chuckled slightly and then opened the door. Eri ran ahead of me towards the car, laughing joyously. I smiled and ran after her. Skip to when they are outside Class 1A classroom at UA, after dropping off Eri at Hizashi's parents' house. Neo, wait out here until I call you in. Oh, I forgot to give this to you. Aizawa pulled out a small box that I had seen on the counter that morning. It was a white box with glitter on it. I raised an eyebrow. Eri wanted to decorate it. Open it up then. He smiled at me as I pulled off the lid. Inside sat a small hearing aid, no bigger than an AirPod. A smile spread across my lips. Thank you. He patted my shoulder, still smiling. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt an impulse. I moved and hugged him tightly, whispering thank you again and again. He hugged me back and then let go. You're welcome, Neo. Now let me introduce you to the class. You should be able to hear fully with that. He tapped the box that was still in my hand. Smiling, he opened the door and then shut it again behind him. I could hear muffled talking behind the door as I put in the hearing aid. All the noises heightened suddenly, surprising me. It was all so much clearer than before. I shook my head, trying to remove all the fuzziness. The door opened. You can come in now. I nodded and thanked Aizawa. I stepped inside and instantly heard an uproar, some cheers, some squeals, and one very loud shout. I half smiled, fixing my hair to cover my ear. Hello. My name is Neo Aizawa. Nice to meet you. The class went silent except for a small chuckle from Shinso, who was sitting in the back row. Shinso, you didn't tell me you had a brother. I glanced at Mina, who had jumped up, opening my mouth to talk. So unmanly, bro, I closed my mouth. This was rather entertaining. Surprisingly, none of them had actually realized who I was other than Bakugo. I smiled at him. Hey, Kaken. He grunted and then rested his head on his arms, watching the class. Aizawa had sat at his desk, feet on top of it, leaning back in his chair. After about 4 or so minutes of the class teasing Shinso, he shouted at them to settle down. Right, you lot? Get back to your seats, and we will run through the schedule for training as we have a new system for it. Neo, sit in the second row next to Uraraka. Uraraka, raise your hand. The girl with short brown hair that I had seen once at the cafe raised her hand. I walked to the desk next to her, dumping my bag next to my chair and pulling out my notebook and a pen. Kirishima POV, hey, isn't that Tsukiko? Never knew he was Aizawa's kid. Dang. Bakugo was beat by his teacher's own kid. I won't try to talk to him now. He isn't using his real name, so he obviously doesn't want to be recognized. I turned to Denki, whispering, recognize him. He looked at me and nodded. Never thought Aizawa would be chasing his own kid. Unless he was recently adopted by him because they look nothing alike. Probably. You two at the back, shut the hell up. I'm trying to teach you. The class burst into laughter, Ida trying to get us to calm down. Eventually they did and Aizawa went back to teaching. Neo had his head resting on one hand, writing in his notebook. Mr. Aizawa, sir. Neo is listening to music. Everyone turned to Uraraka, and Neo jumped slightly. No, I'm not. Uraraka stood up. Then what's that thing in your ear then? Neo reached up to his ear, fiddling with something inside it. Momo gasped slightly. Ochako. Why did you... Hush, Momo. Uraraka stared at her, and Momo backed down. Hey, this is a hearing aid. Neo exclaimed, pulling out a small device that was white and green, no bigger than a wireless earbud. Next time you see something that doesn't fit your standards, maybe find out the person's background before you accuse them. Uraraka deflated, flopping back into her seat. Neo scowled at her before turning back to his notebook. The whole class stared at him, except for me, Mina, Denki, and Bakugo. He had acted so nervous at the start of class, it must have shocked them how confident he had become. Aizawa ignored the commotion and continued with the lesson for a few more minutes before telling us all to go to the changing rooms to get ready for training. We all stood up except for Neo, who remained seated. Shinso walked over to him, apparently checking if he was okay. He walked away a few seconds later, grinning and shaking his head. After changing into costumes, everyone line up. Is everyone here? Right, I want to sleep, so you all can do the training by yourselves. Shinso, Ida, Momo, you are in charge. Yes, sir. With that, Mr. Aizawa walked to the side of the training area, pulled out his yellow sleeping bag, and wriggled into it. Wait, where is Neo? I don't see him. Everyone looked around at Mineta's exclamation except for Shinso, who was busy adjusting his face cover. Who is that? Momo squealed, running forward. I moved to one side and saw a figure in all black with green stripes. Grinning, I recognized the white hair and shook my head. Denki came over and hung onto my shoulder, trying not to laugh. The heck do you want? How did you get in here? Neo shook his head and pulled down his mask. Once again, Uraraka, pay attention to your surroundings. I heard Bakugo mutter something before he walked over to Uraraka, grabbing a hold of her hair. What's your problem, pink cheeks? You've met him before at the cafe Aizawa goes to every day, and yet you don't recognize him. He's even been on TV about 50 times. Uraraka struggled slightly before her eyes widened in realization. Ooh, you're... Yeah, he is, and you better tell no one or I'll make you regret it. Bakugo's palms glowed with energy, and little sparks crackled from them. Uraraka hurriedly agreed and then fell to the ground after Bakugo released her, apologizing repeatedly. Neo turned red and told her it was okay and not to worry. After training, Bakugo POV, dang. Neo is good looking. I watched as shitty hair turned and pounced on Denki, holding him to the ground. Dude. Don't forget you're dating me. Kirishima laughed and I shook my head. Idiots. Hey Neo. Come over here. Kirishima waved to Neo, who walked over, fiddling with his ear. He had put on his uniform a bit sloppily, with his tie undone and his shirt half hanging out. DMN. Can't he dress himself properly? Like what you see, Kaken? I jumped slightly, realizing I had been staring at him. Of course not. And don't call me that. What? Not call you Kaken. That's a shame. He pouted slightly, but I could see he was enjoying this. I mumbled under my breath, the words slurring together. Anyways, what is it, Ishido? I was just wondering how you were, that's all. Haven't seen you in a while. Deku rubbed the back of his neck. I've been in the infirmary while also turning most of the world against All Might, so... Yeah, I've been busy. A lopsided smile appeared on his face, his head tilted slightly to the side. Wanna come to my dorm tonight? We can have a sleepover. Deku's face dropped. Sleepover. Kirishima's jaw dropped. You don't know what a sleepover is? Pikachu asked tentatively, pushing Kirishima off him and standing up. I never had much of a childhood. I looked away toward the others. Uraraka was trembling slightly, and Shinso was talking to Icy Hot. Hey, why don't we get the whole of Class 1A to join the sleepover? We can do it in the living area. Great idea, Kiri. I'll go ask them. Kirishima skipped off to the others and told them what was happening. I could see them nodding and their mouths moving. I'm gonna go to the dorms. I have homework. Bye, Bakugo. Bye, Kaken. Stop calling me that shitty nerd. Deku's face darkened instantly. He grinned mischievously. Kirishima held Denki close to him, both trembling at Deku's expression. You have 5 seconds to run. 1. I didn't wait to see what would happen and took off. Skip to sleepover, Bakugo. Go put this on. Quickly. A pile of clothing hit my face. What is this? Pajamas. Now go change. Everyone has one. I looked at the pieces of clothing, then shrugged, walking back to my room to change. I closed the door behind me and looked through the clothes on my bed. It was a white-gray hoodie with matching pajama bottoms. I pulled off my uniform and slipped the jumper over my head. It was slightly too big but soft and warm. I tugged on the trousers and then a pair of random socks I found in my dresser. I looked in the mirror and sighed. The outfit was comfy, but it made me look soft. I grumbled slightly before grabbing my phone and walking out of my room. When I got back to the living area, almost everyone was there. Kirishima was right. Everyone had a pair of pajamas, all in different colors. Everyone's here. Let's get this started. Wait, Mina. Where's Neo? I'm here. A small chirp of a voice came from behind, and I spun around. Deku stood there, wearing a black oversized hoodie and baggy pajama bottoms. Okay, good, everyone's here now. We all sat on the sofas and armchairs. Deku sat with Denki and Mina on the opposite sofa to me, chatting about something. I leaned back on the sofa and stretched. Hey guys, let's play spin the bottle. A chorus of yes and okays came from around the room. Momo, if you please. Creati handed over an empty bottle to Mina, who placed it on a coffee table. Mineta, get out. But why? Mineta, we girls don't trust you. And I don't think some of the guys do either. Tape dispenser nodded and told him he could stay, but only if he remained on the other side of the room. Grape juice obliged and sat next to the far wall. Denki, you spin first. Denki reached forward and spun the bottle. It went around a few times before landing somewhere between me and Kiri. I think it's closer to Kiri. Kiri, then you know what to do. Denki went red and muttered something about thinking it was the truth or dare version. Kiri, however, got up and went over to Denki. He bent down slightly and kissed him lightly. Kiri then returned to his seat, leaving Pikachu in a state of shock. Right, Zero spin next. It went on for a while, with tape dispenser landing on Icy Hot, Pink Cheeks on Mina, Mina on Creati, and so on until it was Deku's turn. Do I have to? His voice was squeaky and high, a nervous edge to it. You don't have to spin the bottle, but if it lands on you, well, you know what happens. I ain't touching that bottle. No way. Raccoon eyes pouted, then turned to me. Your turn, Bakugo. I grunted, then leaned forward, spinning the bottle. It spun about 2 times before coming to a stop on Deku. He went bright red, covering his face. My eyes widened, and I grinned, seeing I had found something to use against him. Pink Cheeks looked between us. Scared Neo. Come near me and I spill your secrets. He dropped his hand to his lap, crossing his legs and staring right at me. I know every single thing. And you know what? I feel like being a good person and sharing. His voice was sweet but also sharp. He tilted his head slightly, his good ear facing the rest of class. Good Kaken, just stay put and don't come near me. There was a weird silence in the room for a moment before Raccoon Eyes jumped and said something about midnight snacks and a film. I kept my eyes on Deku. He ignored me and pulled up the hood on his hoodie, snuggling into the sofa between the arm and the back. Geez. Neo is creepy. But he looked so many, right, Baku bro? I grunted, then stood up, muttering about putting my phone on charge or something like that. I trudged out of the room, turning left towards the kitchen. DMN. What did I do that for? He's gonna be furious for that. He definitely isn't the same weak kid he used to be. I turned on the kitchen light, illuminating the room. It had brown wood drawers and cabinets with white marble tops and a silver tap. Grabbing a glass from the cupboard, I opened the freezer, grabbing some ice. When I closed it again, I saw Deku standing there. What the? Hey Kaken, what are you doing? He tilted his head slightly, a small smile on his face. I scowled and got some water from the tap. Deku walked up beside me and sat on the counter. What do you want, nerd? To know what you've been doing all these years. Raising my eyebrows, I looked at him, shutting off the water as I did so. Why do you want to know that? Curious. I took a sip of ice water, thinking. I've been training. That all. He looked straight at me, his eyes traveling down my arm. You used to harm yourself, didn't you? His eyes met mine, and I looked away sheepishly. For crying out loud. And I thought I did it as a way of torture for not being good enough. You did it for no good reason. I looked back at him, eyes wide in disbelief. He raised his left arm and pulled down the jumper sleeve. It was riddled with small scars. He pulled his sleeve back down and sat cross-legged on the counter. Why did you do it? I didn't harm myself. These are from my training. He leaned forward and grabbed my face. Don't lie to me, Kaken. I know what you did and why. Don't act all innocent because you're not. I pushed away from his grip, crossing my arms. I did it for a few months after you went missing. I met Kirishima before we started UA, and he helped me to stop. I haven't done it since. Deku smiled, leaning even closer. So you missed me, Kaken, how cute. I blushed slightly and took another sip of water. How does he change his personality so easily? And why am I blushing? Deku chuckled and sat back on the counter. I won't tell. None of your secrets will go missing if you agree to one thing. What's that? Deku's face shifted, showing concern. Keep my Neta away from me. He's so creepy. Like, what's wrong with him? I snorted into my cup and then choked on a bit of ice. Deku giggled slightly. I cleared my throat, then put down my glass. Alright, deal. You also have an IOU from me for. That's good. Well, I'm going back to the sleepover. Kirishima was declaring war on Denki for something silly like he refused to kiss him. Can't remember the details, but it still sounds amusing. He waved his hand over his shoulder, brushing away the nonsense. Deku then turned to look at me again, hand going to his neck, fiddling with a gold chain. You know, Kaken, I think you went the wrong way to put your phone on charge. Especially since your charger was next to you. I scowled slightly. Let's go back to the sleepover. Great. Deku hopped off the side and left the room, heading back to the living area. I sighed and followed him. He was right. Kirishima was playfully attacking Denki with a pillow while shouting about him refusing to kiss him. Deku was perched on the arm of the sofa, watching intently. I walked over to the sofa and sank into it, fiddling with my phone. Eventually they stopped fighting and Raccoon Eyes put on a film. It was Harry Potter, and Deku's eyes lit up, a large grin on his face. When the first one ended, Pikachu put on the second. By the time we reached the fifth, half of the group had fallen asleep. Deku was still sitting on the arm of the sofa, hand wrapped around the golden chain on his neck. He yawned widely and rubbed his eyes. He got up and came to sit beside me on the sofa, curling up. Good night, Kaken. Night, Neo. He leaned against me and fell asleep, breathing lightly. I half smiled, glad to know he was alive and happy. 5 years later, Izuku graduated from UA along with his class. He moved to the UK for 2 years, becoming one of the top heroes. He is now on a plane back to Japan with a friend he made in Britain. You know, Izu, I've never actually left England before. I looked at him, tearing my gaze from the window. Are you scared, Basil? What? I snickered and turned back to the window. Basil's hero name was Elwood, meaning elder tree forest, relating to his quirk of plants. He could create any plant just by touching an object of nature that hadn't been destroyed by humans, such as soil or rock. This quirk was extremely useful but also dangerous, as he could grow healing plants, but also poisonous ones, making him a feared person to many English villains. I had met him about 2 months after I traveled to England. He was on patrol when I ran into him, carrying a large rucksack over my shoulder and wearing my mask. He instantly assumed I was a villain and tried to attack. Tried, as he couldn't get close enough to me. I hollered at him that I was a hero who had just gotten off patrol, and he stopped. He turned bright red and apologized an absurd amount of times. After that, he suggested we meet at Regent's Park, and I did. From that point, we became friends. You're seeing your boyfriend later, aren't you? I turned back to him. Yeah, and you get to meet him. Can't wait to see your reaction to him. Should be amusing. I chuckled, then turned on music on my phone, pulling on my headphones. Basil knew nothing about my boyfriend other than his real name. I had told Kaken to meet me in his hero costume. Basil got up and went to the bar at the front of the plane. We were in the first-class area of the plane, and no one else was sitting there. Basil had said that he wouldn't fly in a private jet because of how small they were. He came back and handed me a glass. I raised an eyebrow. It is juice. I would never give you wine or something like that ever again after that incident. What incident? Basil sat down and placed his glass on the table next to him. You had 2 beers, got tipsy, nearly set the bar on fire, and tried to kiss me thinking we were dating. I went red and took a sip of the juice. Most definitely was tipsy as I don't remember anything of that. I'm not sure if that is a good thing or not. Intercom, please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts. We will be beginning our descent shortly. I clicked on my seatbelt and leaned back in my seat, getting out my phone. Over messages Izu, hey Kaken. Cats, what is it de? Izu, nice to see you as well. Face with rolling eyes Cats. Hello my love, how are you? Izu, great, thanks. We are about to land. I'll meet you at checkout with BAS in our hero stuff. Cats, okay, see you soon. Back to non-messaging. I put my phone in my pocket and finished my drink. Basil clipped on his seatbelt and tied up the laces of his boots. His costume consisted of a floral patterned suit jacket with a green waistcoat and briefs. He had little pouches of dirt in his pockets that he could use to activate his quirk. BAS looked out of the window and gasped, seeing Japan for the first time. Looked as well and smiled. We were flying past the building I always used to go to when I was a vigilante. Such nice memories. Now I can relive them as a hero. I smiled and thought about what I would do first. Ah no. What's wrong? I forgot to tell my family that I am coming back today. They are going to be upset. I sighed and closed my eyes, my hand going to the chain around my neck. Can't be that bad. Plus I can meet them. I opened one eye and gazed at Biz, smirking slightly. He looked confused and I shook my head, pulling up my mask. Intercom, we are now landing. Please remain seated until our first-class passengers have departed the plane. A slight jolt sent me sitting up straight as the plane landed. Basil held the arms of the chair, fear evident on his face. Chuckling, I undid my seatbelt and stood up, tugging my bag from the overhead compartment. BS took off his belt and stood up, stretching his arms behind his back. Get your bag and you can get off the plane. Basil quickly came to my side and grabbed his bag. A flight attendant was signaling us towards a door that had just opened. We thanked her and walked down the steps into the airport lobby. A couple of shrieks erupted as a crowd formed at the bottom of the steps. You aren't known as a hero here, are you? Not a hero exactly, but I am known here very well. I scanned the crowd for Kaken but didn't see him. OMG. Tsukiko, can I have your autograph? Why yeah sure. What's your name? I took the piece of paper from the girl and pulled out a pen from my bag. My name is Tabby. That's a nice name. Here you go. I handed back the signed paper. Thank you. Who is your friend? His name is Elwood. He is the number 12 hero in England. Tabby's eyes widened, and she held out the paper to him as well. Can I have your autograph too? Sure thing, kiddo. BS took the paper and wrote his signature. Thank you. By Tsukiko and Elwood. She waved and ran off to her parents, who were standing a short distance away. I smiled and then looked around. Kaken had arrived and was standing by the counter, trying to be inconspicuous. Elwood, over here. I grabbed his upper arm and dragged him through the crowd. I waved at the people I was passing and smiled as they took pictures of us. When we reached the edge of the crowd, I dropped his arm and ran to Kaken, pulling down my mask. I put my arms around his neck and kissed his cheek lightly. Hi baby. Have I caused you too much trouble? He chuckled slightly and kissed me. No, but I think your friend might be surprised. I let go of him and turned around. Basil was standing a short distance away, his jaw dropped in shock. You're dating the number 1 hero. Forbidden. He shook his head and regained his composure. Nice to meet you, Forbidden. My name is Elwood. He extended his hand, and Kaken shook it. Is this how British people greet each other? I chuckled and nodded. An attendant walked over with our suitcases and I thanked them. Kaken released boss's hand and took my suitcase. Erase your head will be happy to see you. He hasn't stopped talking about it for the past month. Shinso, Eri, and Mike are excited. I laughed and pulled up my mask again. Off to UA then. Come on Elwood, let me show you my home. Skip to when they are at you, so this is you. Kaken pulled off his mask and took out his phone, pressing some buttons before holding it up to his ear. Hello, this is Mike speaking. Erase your head is currently Una Dash. Mike, it's me. I'm out front with Izu and... My name is Basil. Out front with Izu and Basil. I'm going to get Hawks on the phone soon so he can get Izu's other family here to surprise them. Got it, Katsuki. I'll open up the front gate now. Kaken put his phone back into his pocket and looked at us. Mike will be here in a minute. I made sure he had Eri and Shinso at the school with him today. I'm guessing you didn't tell Hawks you were coming back. I looked away sheepishly. No, would you be able to call him and say the HC needs to talk to him, Tuya, and Himiko in Niza's office? I can wait for them there. Got it. Thanks, babe. The gates creaked open, and Mike launched himself at me. Izu, my boy. You're back. Shota is going to flip when he sees you. Oh, I'm so happy. I laughed and hugged him tightly, my deaf ear facing him, thankfully considering how loud he was shouting. And this must be your friend. How do you do? Mike let go of me and walked to Biz, who extended his hand again. Basil, Papa Basil. Hello Basil. Call me Hizashi. Oh, how good it is to meet you. Mike shook Basil's hand enthusiastically before letting go. Come with me, Eri is in the teacher's lounge with Shinso, and Aizawa is teaching. Skip to after Mike took them to the teacher's lounge, Izuku. Hiya Eri. I hugged Eri tightly, trying not to fall over from her bouncing. Wow. Since when were you this tall? It has been 3 years since you last saw her, Izuku. I looked up and saw Shinso leaning against the wall, grinning widely. Shinso, how are you? I let go of Eri and walked up to him. He was taller than me now, and it felt slightly awkward. Geez Izu. Since when were you so awkward? He pulled me into a hug before releasing me and looking over my shoulder at Basil. Who's the cutie? His name is Basil and he is 25, Shinso. Okay and... I turned to look at Basil and saw he was bright red, while Kaken had his hand in his mouth, trying not to laugh. I glared at him, and he turned to face the wall, chuckling. Basil, meet my brother Shinso. He is an underground hero. And, nice to meet you. Basil gave a shy smile. I'm so excited. Mike snorted into his hand at Eri's remark, and Basil's face turned even redder. Kaken, can you call Hawks now? I think it might be easier. Kaken nodded and walked out of the room. Wait Hawks. The Hawks. You know him. Basil snapped back to reality. Oh yeah. He's my older brother. Well not really. More like a close friend. Basil sat down on the sofa. This is too much for one day. I find out you're dating the number 1 hero, your brother is flirting with me, and you're best friends with the number 2 hero. You're also known here by everyone, but you haven't done any hero work here. Shinso and Mike blinked slowly, apparently trying to figure out what was wrong with that sentence. I sighed and sat down on the sofa opposite him. I'll explain later when the rest of my family gets here. Kaken returned at that point. He will be here in 15 minutes, along with Himiko and Tuya. Thanks, Kaken. He sat on the sofa next to me, while Shinso went to sit next to Basil, and Mike settled into the armchair with Eri on his lap. Shinso stretched his arms upward, then let them relax, one curling around Basil's shoulders. Smooth, Shinso. I laughed at Basil's expression, and Kaken grinned slyly. Shinso shrugged and turned to Basil, starting up a conversation. About 3 minutes later, the door opened, and I saw Hawks, Toga, and Dabi walk in. We're here. Where's the hero calm? Hawks stopped mid-sentence, pausing in the doorway. His eyes widened, and his wings dropped to his sides. Dabi pushed past him, followed by Himiko, and they both froze. Zuzu. Is that you? I nodded. Izuku, I'm going to kill you. Dabi lunged forward, and Kaken jumped up. If you hurt him, I'll send you to jail, burnt toast. I stood and pushed Kaken aside, giving him a warning look. I walked up to Tuya and waved my hand in front of his face. He blinked, then hugged me. Why didn't you tell us you were coming back? He rested his head on top of mine. Hawks and Toga snapped out of it and hurried over, joining the hug. Kay, are you crying? I looked up and saw Kay had his head on Tuya's shoulder, tears running down his face. Why wouldn't I be? Our brother is back. Himiko squealed, then started jumping up and down. Himiko, be careful. Too late. We toppled over, landing in a pile. Himiko stood up and helped me up. We looked at Kay and Tuya, and saw Kay was laying on top of Tuya. They were sharing a moment together. EW. Don't kiss here. It's disgusting. Himiko pulled a face and pretended to GG. Mike covered Eri's eyes and his own. Kay stood up, blushing slightly, and helped up Tuya. I'm surprised you two aren't married yet. You've only been dating for what? 10 years? 11 years? Tuya glanced at Kay. Someone keeps refusing me. So in the end I stopped asking. I never said no. I said not yet. Same thing, chicken. I rolled my eyes and turned to Basil, who seemed in a state of shock. Alright, guys, meet Basil. He is my friend from England, and he is the number 12 hero. Basil, meet Himiko, Tuya, and Hawks. I pointed to them as I said their names. They greeted each other, then sat down in the armchairs, chatting about random things. Pa, will Dad be in the old class still? Yeah, he is. I'm going to go meet him in class. He would get a bigger surprise then. A chorus of okays and byes came and I left the room. I strolled down the hallways looking out of the windows. The sun told me it was almost midday, so students would be let out of class soon. I came to the stairs and slid down the banister, jumping off at the end and landing silently on the floor. I smiled and shifted my hair out of my eyes. A bell rang out, signaling the end of class. I hurried down the corridor and stood by the window opposite class 1A. About 30 seconds later, the door opened. About 20 students left the room, Aizawa following behind them. He stopped just outside the doorway, talking to a student who was still in class. I whistled a tune and he stopped talking. He turned slowly, his gaze meeting mine. "Hello, Dad." He rushed forward and hugged me tightly. "Aizu, I'm so glad you're back." I hugged him back, resting my head on his shoulder, eyes shut. I smiled and I felt him smile with me. We hugged for what seemed like a decade before he let me go. I opened my eyes and saw a girl standing in the doorway of class 1A. She looked familiar and I recognized her. "Tsukiko. I did it. I'm going to be a hero. Like you said I would." Chapter End. Haruto POV. Papa. "Come play." Papa turned to look at me, a sad smile on his face. "I'm sorry, Haruto, but I need to go on patrol now. Your father will be home soon, though, and Uncle Izuku will be coming as well." I huffed, ruffling my wings slightly. Papa always had to go on patrol. He never let me come either. "Why can't I come with you though, Papa? I want to fly with you." Papa knelt down in front of me, his red wings folded close to his back. "You're too young, Haru. I'm 8. Nearly 9. Why can't I come? I know how to fly. You taught me how to. I won't get in your way." I gave him my best puppy eyes, fluffing up my wings. He looked away, trying not to smirk. "You do the same thing your father does to me, Haruto?" "Huh. I don't do that, do I?" Papa blinked in slight shock. "What did you just say?" I put my hands on my hips, trying to make myself look older. "I said that I don't do that." "Oh no. Haruto. Bye-bye, Papa." I took off running, Papa following behind me shouting. I ran in circles, making Papa dodge around the table and sofas as I easily ducked around or under them. "I'm home." I grinned and ran towards the hallway, sliding on the wooden floor. "Help me." I ran to Dad and jumped onto him, my arms wrapped around his neck. His skin was rough and flaky, but I didn't mind right now. I was too scared of Papa. "Hiya, Haruto. What's up?" "Your son swore." "Really? That is brilliant. Well done." Papa coughed. That was very bad of you, Haruto." "What did you say?" Dad whispered to me that he would make sure I wouldn't get in trouble. "Haruto was trying to convince me to take him on patrol with me and made the same face as you when you had done something wrong. I told him you both did the same thing to me. I was going to say that you both make me feel guilty when you do that, but he decided to be clever." Dad set me down, and I looked behind him to see Uncle Aizu. I grinned and ran up to him, grabbing him around the middle. He patted my head and covered his mouth, trying not to laugh. "He said that he didn't do that." "What?" Uncle Aizu snickered slightly before bowing his head and looking at the floor. "Yes, he said that twice, realized his mistake, and then swore." Dad rubbed the back of his neck. "I wonder where he got that language from. Very rude." It was my turn to laugh now, and Uncle Aizu slapped his hand over my mouth. "You know very well where he got it from, Tuya Todoroki." "Come on now, Birdie, he was telling the truth. He doesn't do that to you, does he?" "Well, hope not." "Tuya Todoroki. We have company. Do not do what I think you are going to do. I also have patrol." Dad sighed and hung his coat up on the hook, kicking his shoes underneath it. "Very well. Have a nice patrol, Birdie." Papa walked past us, gave Dad a quick kiss, and greeted Uncle Aizu, rumpling up my hair before he left. I patted my hair flat again before running past Dad into the living area, putting on the TV. "What are you doing, Haruto?" "My friend at school said that Uncle Katz would be on TV today at 5, and it is nearly 5 o'clock. Uncle Aizu came and sat on the sofa next to me, yawning slightly. "Dad, Uncle Katz, Uncle Shinso and Himiko, Uncle Yasashi, and Uncle Shota all worked in the same agency, with Himiko and Dad working in the background. Basil worked there too, but he was over in England again, and Uncle Shinso was really upset. Uncle Shinso wanted to ask out Basil but was too nervous since Basil is a famous hero while he only works underground. I'm going to try to set them up at some point. I want a bigger family. Kokoro POV Himiko. Can we go watch Dad at his interview? Please see. Himiko stood up and came over, throwing me my coat. Come on then. I'll just go grab my phone and we can go. Maybe we can meet up with Haruto later. I cheered and ran to the door, Himiko running after me. I slipped on my shoes and ran out of the house, small explosions erupting from my hands. Mind your quirk. You only got it recently, so you could hurt yourself. I stuck my tongue out. I was a late bloomer, getting my quirk at age 6. Dad and Pops thought I would be quirkless like Pops, but in the end, I got my quirk. It wasn't particularly powerful, but I was still happy. About half an hour later, Himiko and I had made it to the interview area. It was a large garden outside the Todoroki estate. It was massive. Shoto was standing in the window of the house, watching quietly. I waved at him, grinning widely. He noticed me and waved back. Shoto disappeared from view for a while before he came out of the house, walking down the path. I pulled Himiko with me to the gate. Hiya, kid. Hello, Uncle Sho. He wasn't really my uncle, but he was Pop's best friend, so I dubbed him Uncle. Your dad is over there if you wanted to see him, but keep a distance as they don't know about you being his child. I nodded and pushed my way to the front of the crowd. Dad was talking to a lady. She was way too close to him. I scowled. I stayed put, not wanting to give myself away. Well, I did for a few minutes before she put her hand on his upper arm, rubbing it. Get away from him. I ran forward, latching onto Dad's legs. I heard Himiko hissing at me to come back, but I ignored her. Hello, little girl. Who are you? Nunya. Nunya who? Nunya business. The lady blinked at me before bending down to my level. She sneered at me. Get out of here, Brett. I am doing an interview, and you aren't ruining it. I stuck my tongue out at her, and she grabbed my arm. Let go of me. I screamed, trying to release her grip. Her hand suddenly left my arm. I looked up and saw Dad standing in front of me. Do not touch my daughter. Daughter. Yes, daughter. Now if you don't mind, I am going to keep her with me and continue the interview as long as you show her respect. I heard Himiko and Sho groan. I turned to them, and Sho showed me his phone screen. My face went pale. Pops was calling him. I shook my head and he hung up. Dad continued the interview, holding my hand. Hawks arrived halfway through, a look of surprise on his face seeing me there. I smiled at him and waved. The interview lady gave me a disapproving look. Let me greet my uncle. Hawks face-bombed, and Dad squeezed my hand slightly. Oops. The crowd parted, a white figure pushing through it. Pops was here. Kokoro. I let out a small squeal and ran towards the crowd, pushing through to Pops. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to swear, Pops. Pops picked me up and carried me to the stage, pulling up a face mask. The interview lady was flabbergasted. What? I'm so confused. Hit by a quirk. Yes, she is my child, and that is my boyfriend that you were touching. She blinked before apologizing and continuing the interview. I snuggled down into Pop's shoulder. A short while later, Kay's phone rang, startling me. I let off a small explosion and squeaked. Pops chuckled as Uncle Kigo answered his phone. Hello, this is Hawks. You are on speaker right and, Birdie, what is happening? You're on speaker. For goodness sake. Dad, what's happening? The interview lady rubbed her head. Boss. You also have a child. And a boyfriend. Husband and child. And that wasn't supposed to happen. Birdie, should we come meet you? I can get the others as well. Might as well too. Both of our secrets have been spilled. I looked at Pops, muttering apologies over and over again. He patted my head, hushing me. The media was having a field day. Many people were recording us, and the interview lady had gone off topic and was questioning us about our families. Eventually, Uncle Tu, Hikaru, Uncle Aizawa, Uncle Mike, and Shinso turned up. Hikaru flew straight to Kei, and Dabi gave Kei a kiss. Shinso pulled Toga out of the crowd, a sad smile on his face as Basil wasn't there. I looked at Hikaru, and we made a silent promise to set Shinso and Basil up. So this is your family. Our slightly chaotic, loving family.